Hello everyone, welcome back after lunch. We've affectionately got the graveyard shift. After lunch on the second day is not normally a real great time to do a presentation, but I'd like to open by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land. They've done a pretty good job of looking after where we live for the last 60,000 years, and maybe, just maybe, they can teach us a thing or two about sustainability, because we've done a pretty shit job of looking after it for the last 200 years, and they've done a magnificent job in all that time. So, my name's Tony Wolfe. Before I go much further, after the breakfast this morning, I was inspired, and I feel that I should acknowledge my white male privilege in the fact that I get to stand up here, and I realise that I've had a bit of a kickstart in life purely from the fact of where I was born into society. I was born in a family of 6, and I look at my 3 sisters and realise that they didn't get the same opportunities as the boys in the family did. I started an apprenticeship at the SEC at the age of 15. I applied for a job called electrical mechanic. I didn't even know what that was. I wanted to be a TV repairman, but they didn't have that in the SEC at the time, so that was the closest thing that I could find, and I worked out that it's just an electrician. But so I started at Hazelwood Power Station over 40 years ago, 44 years or so. I was born in Morwell, grew up in the valley, raised on a dairy farm. You know, we looked out the window at the 8 chimneys of Hazelwood, and that was the dream, was to always get a job at the SEC. You had a job for life, and for those 40 years, most of those 40 years, you know, we were very proud of producing electricity for the state and for the country. But today's session, we don't want to dwell too much on where we've come from. We all know where we've come from. I've done a pretty good job of dwelling in the past already. So today's session, we want to hopefully make it future focused, positive, and where we're off to the future. We've got 4 panellists today, and some great talent to come out and present to you. I'd like to start. Naomi Kerp is the environmental lead at Exodus. She's an environmental scientist, and I'd like Naomi to try and set the picture of why it's so important that we make this transition happen. So, thanks, Naomi.
Thanks so much, Tony. I'm from WA, so this is my first time to Gippsland, even though I've been working on projects in the Bass Strait for a long time. So it's been a really eye-opening conference, and thank you for having me today. So as Tony said, I'm an environmental scientist. I've been working for 24 years in the energy and resources industry. I started my career in mining in regional WA, then spent almost 10 years working for Chevron Australia on the Gorgon project, so oil and gas, Australia's largest resources project, CCS. And since I've been a consultant for the last 6 or 7 years, I've worked over a whole range of different energy types, so offshore wind, green hydrogen, onshore renewables, blue ammonia, wave energy, sun cable. So I think I've got a pretty good first-hand understanding of the different types of environmental impacts from these different types of energy systems. So Tony's asked me to give a quick grounding today on this panel as to why it's really important to transition. So I think it's 2024, I think we're all on the same page with this, but just briefly. So as I think we all know, over the past 150 years, the atmospheric CO2 has increased, almost doubled, from 270 to nearly 400 ppm, parts per million. So this has led to increased, obviously, atmospheric temperature, has led to increased sea temperature. There's been 5 coral bleaching events on the Great Barrier Reef since 2016. There's been a lot of, obviously, ice sheet melting in Antarctica, 150 billion tonnes per year of the largest ice sheet. This is leading, obviously, to increased increased sea level rises, storm surges, flooding. I think we're all pretty familiar with all of this. Extreme weather events, I mean, we've seen over the last couple of days in Gippsland. I think we've even seen it in our lifetimes. The sort of difference in seasonality, the increased bushfire risk, the storms, flooding, we're all pretty familiar with it. So international scientific consensus, again, it's 2024, I think we all know this, but climate change is real, it's happening, and it's caused by anthropogenic sources, so caused by humans. Decades of published research, it's not just natural variability, and we need some rapid change. So the International Governmental Panel on Climate Change has released this report. We all know what it says, I'm pretty sure, that's why we're all here today. And we've all heard of COP, it's 193 nations gathered together every year, most recently, to agree on the Paris Agreement, which has been legislated in Australia through the Climate Change Act, and Victoria, one of the first jurisdictions in the world to actually legislate for net zero through the Victorian Climate Change Act, so very progressive. And Australia's targets, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 43% by 2050. So ambitious. Can we do it? So in terms of energy transition, the left-hand graph you can see is an Australian graph showing that even since 2007, we've had a 30% reduction in emissions from energy. So you can see the maroon little shape there is the renewables component of our energy source within Australia. It's increased, even in the last sort of 2 decades. So we're going in the right direction. The right-hand graph is the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook, their report they release every year. The last one was 2023. So you can see it's coal, oil, natural gas for those first pictures on the left, and then obviously declining through each of the scenarios, the announced pledges, and into the net zero scenario. So we can see, and I think we all know this, coal, oil, natural gas will decline, and this is not just through the targets that each country is committed to as part of their NDCs, it's also the cost of ageing infrastructure, carbon-related pricing around the world, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. So a lot of caveats on this. What I wanted to show here is, I think it's really important to acknowledge that every energy source has an impact, has an environmental impact. In fact, everything we do as humans has an environmental impact, right? So it's a matter of us weighing up the different costs and the different benefits of that, not just environmental, but as society, the levelized cost of energy, what energy yield we get, and it's going to vary for different regions as well, depending on the policies of that location, the proximity to energy demand, transmission. A lot of energy sources are spatially constrained, like oil and gas or geothermal. Others, like wind and solar, are ubiquitous, but they obviously vary in quality, depending on where you are. So what I wanted to show here, just as a quick snapshot, it's very simplified and generalistic, but what I wanted to show is the green is an opportunity, the red is a challenge. So it's not an exhaustive list by any means, but what I want to show is the levelised cost of energy. In general, the renewable generally has a higher levelised cost, right? I think we all know this, but we know it's going to change over time. With economies of scale and increases in technology, that levelised cost will come down. Energy yield, again, in general, non-renewables generally have a higher energy yield than non-renewables, particularly with solar being quite a bit lower than the rest. We know we need a much larger solar project to generate the sort of yields that we see from other types of renewable energy. Greenhouse gas emissions, again, this is not a surprise to anyone, but really showing in terms of, let me check the actual stats. Offshore wind, 11 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. Coal, 980. So a really big difference there. Disturbance footprint, in terms of direct disturbance. Living here in Gippsland, you obviously are very familiar with the large disturbance footprint of coal mines and the associated power generation infrastructure that you need. In terms of wind, onshore wind, offshore wind, it's not that large a disturbance footprint, but it can be over a larger area. And of course, including the transmission lines, proximity to, townships and communities, all of that visual impact is still a type of disturbance, right, even if it's not direct. Bioenergy can have a high footprint if it's using crops for biomass, so that's obviously increasing that. And then looking at waste generation. So this isn't only direct waste generation. I think obviously there's going to be huge challenges in terms of nuclear power, in terms of that high risk, both to the environment and human health for a very long time of that nuclear waste, but also considering all of the infrastructure that is constructed for all of these power systems. Whether it's oil and gas, there'll be contaminants from potentially mercury, norms, hydrocarbons. Obviously nuclear has a big challenge. And even the other types of energy generation like wind. There's obviously all that steel, there's the turbine blades. Can they be recycled? So it's really, I hope what this is showing is that it's up to us as a society to weigh up these different impacts and benefits and consider that net environmental benefit and the economic benefit of each of these different energy types. And I think Gippsland has really progressed in this space. There's been talk over the last few days about rather than letting change happen to you, to be part of that change. And I think from an outsider's perspective, it really seems like Gippsland is really looking at those opportunities, and there's so much in terms of new energy going on in Gippsland and what's been announced this morning. So it's a real, I think there's a cause for real optimism. So thank you. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Naomi. That was, lots of good stats there, and I'm sure you've got plenty of questions, and I neglected to ask you, please, this is your session. Enter the questions on the app so that we can ask the panellists as we go. That would be great. We'll have a bit of a Q&A after they've all presented. So our next presenter, we've got quite a range of presenters on the panel today. Our next presenter is Nick Birchall, who is the Commercial Manager for Esso. So I'd like to introduce Nick. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Naomi. I'd like to start my discussion today on my nomination for Macquarie Dictionary's Word of the Year for 2024, which, in my opinion, should be the German word Dunkelflaute, which literally means dark doldrums, but is better understood to mean a period of wind drought, referring to a period of gloomy weather with no sun and no wind. And it's certainly not what we've experienced in this part of southern Australia this past week, but that was exactly what we did experience across much of southern Australia in the months of May and June this year. But during that time, in May and June, it was gas that continued to power our homes and our businesses, to keep us warm, to keep manufacturing running, and literally to keep the lights on. So although there is continuing rollout and commissioning of new battery storage systems, and we heard from Minister Bowen earlier today, there are no systems yet ready to manage such an extended period of low renewable generation for life beyond coal. Most forecasters see this as being so for decades to come, not just for the next year or two. And across that time, at such times of wind drought and solar radiation shortfalls, it will be gas that will be used for power generation. So it might be a point of contention for some, but gas is critical to the energy transition. It's the ultimate inflexible power in terms of its ability to turn on and off, unequivocally supporting the rollout of renewables and helping for life beyond coal. The Australian Energy Market Operator recently reported a 16% increase in gas power generation was required last quarter versus the prior year same quarter due to the solar and wind drought. So when the wind isn't blowing enough to turn the turbines or the sun isn't shining to power the fuel cells, it's gas that ensures resilience and stability of the grid. As we roll out renewables Every megawatt of additional renewable requires an additional contribution of firming supply. For quite some time, it will be gas that will provide that firming, and much of that gas will be Gippsland gas. In addition to maintaining a firming role in the electricity market, natural gas is key for industries such as glass, bricks, steel, fertiliser, recycling, and critical minerals that don't have an alternative energy or alternative feedstock. So while renewable energy is essential to help us achieve net zero, it's not sufficient alone, and it cannot reduce emissions in these industrial sectors that are at the heart of our modern society and materials that are also at the heart of the energy transition. So that's gas, but what else? Over and above Gippsland gas being produced today and from other gas projects currently under consideration, it will be collaboration and a technology-neutral approach that will be key to supporting the transition to a lower carbon future beyond coal. Beyond coal, there will not be a single technological innovation alone that we will rely upon. But the strategy is clear. Don't pick winners and losers. Don't focus on answers that fail to solve all aspects of the problem. For really complex issues like climate change, keep all viable solutions in play, even if they don't align with your beliefs or ideology. And most importantly, leverage the power of competitive markets. In practical terms, governments fund research, universities and labs conduct it, and companies operating in competitive markets develop and deploy it. That's how solutions beyond coal will emerge and be implemented. It's true that market incentives for carbon reduction, like a price on carbon or policy incentives, can drive innovation and engage all relevant players and lead to better solutions faster. Similarly, technology-neutral subsidies can kickstart a range of low-emissions solutions beyond coal. But they must have an expiration date because no government can afford to subsidise the energy transition forever. Ultimately, we must allow technologies and companies to compete and let the best solutions win, and we need an all-of-the-above approach to those solutions because it's far too early in the process to rule out any technology. So with that said, I'm keen to continue the conversation. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Nick. We'll move right along. So our next speaker, most of you will probably know or have heard of, Christo van Niekerk, and he's the General Manager, AGL Loy Yang A. I'll even put the A on the end of it. So thanks, Christo.
Thanks, Tony. Good afternoon, everybody. So firstly, acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're on, the Braakling people of the Gunai-Kurnai Nation, and then paying our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. What I want to touch on this afternoon is, since I've joined AGL Loy Yang 3 years ago, there's been a couple of announcements related to earlier closure. So one of the things that employees would approach me and ask, so what does that mean for us? And people also in the community would ask us, what does it mean? Does it mean you're now not going to maintain your assets, you're going to run it down, extract value out of it, and start falling over? Or how are you going to make sure that we can maintain supply onto the grid? What we started off at the beginning of last year when we looked at forecasts around what is going to be required from Loy Yang A, we actually saw that we're going to need to improve our plant availability over the next 4 or 5 years. And we started with a strategy on site which we referred to as Target 92, and that's for us to achieve a 92% plant availability by 2029 and 2030, and to be able to maintain a high level of plant availability and reliability from 2030 up to closure in 2035. Last year when we started this program, 2024 financial year, that ended at the end of June, we actually achieved 92.3%, which was also the best that we've had since 2010, since AGL has actually acquired Loy Yang A, so which good performance, as well as a very good coal supply availability performance of 99.81%. So that's a measure of the coal supply availability coming from the mine, supplying both Loy Yang A as well as Loy Yang B. Now, the Target 92 focus is a broad focus. So it starts on the foundation of safety as the basis on which we build all our processes, and then looking at our process optimization, risk management, so the full spectrum of processes that help us to operate and maintain the plant. In terms of flexible operations, there's a second initiative that we started off with. So what we find is with the penetration of renewables into the market, particularly during midday periods, where there's high solar and wind, we're required to wind units down, to deload units to minimum load. We've done some work over the last 18 months where we can now deload our units to 250 megawatts, and eventually we're going to go down to 230 megawatts. These units are rated at 560 on units 1, 3, and 4, and unit 2 is rated at 530 megawatts due to a different turbine generator. So that gives us flexibility to make sure that we can support that midday requirements from high renewable penetration, and also being able to support the market in that way. Our goal over the next 4 years, as I've indicated, is to make sure that we have good plant availability. So we've got a cycle of major outages that we've got planned, starting with Unit 4 in the end of this month, the end of September, and that's going to run all 4 units in the next 4-year period. So financial year by year, we're going to take these units off for extended periods, 50 days plus, so we can do major overhauls on them and make sure that we have good, reliable plant available to support the grid, to support the NEM as we run to closure in 2035. In terms of planning for the future, and this is a slide that AGL has used a couple of times, so it talks about AGL's ambitions to transition from coal-burning power plants into renewables. We set targets for ourselves to achieve 5 gigawatts by 2030 and a total of 12 gigawatts by 2036 of renewables that we want to build over the next decade and a bit. So it's very ambitious. There's a lot of work that's happening in line with this strategic objective that we set for ourselves, and it's well on track at this stage to achieve our targets that we set for ourselves. What's going to happen with our site? So if you look at Loy Yang A, at AGL Loy Yang, what is the plans post-closure in 2035? So we've got a plan to set the site up as an integrated industrial energy hub, where we can attract businesses to utilize the infrastructure that's already established, to look at basically how we can get synergies between different businesses. And some of the work is already starting through our division, a corporate division called Energy Hubs, looking at options around this. So just to give you some examples, so if you look at our Hunter operations with Bayswater and Liddell, now Liddell Power Station was closed last year, so because of that reason, there's already a lot of progress made. This picture of the Torrens Island grid-scale battery, which was commissioned last year in August, and it's currently in full operation. We currently also started work on the Liddell grid-scale battery, so that work has already started. And these 2 sites are progress because Torrens is planned to, is targeted to close in 2026, and as I've indicated, Liddell has already closed last year. So similar to these sites, we're also looking at options to repurpose our site into an integrated industrial energy hub. The last point I just want to touch on is that last year we've signed a strategic or structured transition agreement with the Victorian government. This agreement we signed to get confirmation or to surety around the closure date of 2035. And it's also to commit ourselves to support them, to support the grid up to closure in 2035. So there are certain safeguards within the agreement. So if market conditions change, etc., there's a risk-sharing mechanism in there. But then more importantly is also committing us as AGL in terms of investment, investing $50 million over the next 12 years to support this transition. And we'll establish a community and economic development fund, which we'll do with state government, and to see that we can also invest into the community, but then also support our own employees through this transition. And that's it. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. Thanks, Christo. Our final panellist for this afternoon, if you've lived in Latrobe Valley and hung around, this area. No doubt you would have come across this bloke, I think, in your travels. Steve Dodd, the Secretary of the Gippsland Trades and Labour Council. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Wolfe. It's a pleasure to come here and talk to you today. Maybe I'll just start off by telling you who we are. Gippsland Trades and Labour Council, we're the peak union body for 24 affiliated unions in this region. And I understand that this section or this thing is talking about beyond coal. But we have a lot of challenges at the moment. It's not only coal, but it's the oil and gas industry, the forestry industry. You know, they're all changing. They're all sunset industries, to be quite honest. And, you know, our slogan of the Trades and Labour Council is, you know, fighting for workers and communities and fighting for fairness. And that's what we're about. We're actually fighting for fairness. And we see our role as lobbying, you know, employers, lobbying government, you know, to try and get a real good outcome, because there is no doubt industry is changing. Biggest change I've seen in the last 22 years, since I've seen it change in the last 22 years since I was a union organiser. And, you know, the Trades and Labour Council, we know that we no longer need to be just an industrial organisation, but we're also a community organisation. When I say we're a community organisation, we have a number of projects where we're training young people, cold community people, you know, people to work in hospitality. So they're all of the things that we're looking at, but we still maintain our industrial base going forward. You know, to be quite honest, you know, unless we can all get our act together, and I'm talking about government, I'm talking about employers, I'm talking about community, you know, there's not going to be a very good place after these industries shut down. I'm hopeful. You know, we keep hearing about the offshore wind, but there's also the onshore wind. There's such other projects as geothermal, which will be, you don't hear it spoken about much, but, you know, and wave power. You know, I don't hear people talking much about wave power, but geothermal, you know, there's been a number of projects muted for this region. I think the waste to energy out of the Australian paper, up at Loy Yang, it's the coal to hydrogen. You know, if some of these projects were to get up and running, you know, that would pretty much help with employment and the community in general, you know, to maintain their standard of living going forward. So I just think that at this point in time, we're going through change, and one thing I'll say to you is all, don't be frightened of change. We should just grab it and run with it. And having said that, you know, I think it's a bright future for this region. You know, I'm not a glass half empty person, I'm a glass half full. And I can see some exciting projects coming to fruition in this region. And Tony, I'll pretty much leave it at that, mate.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. So we'll move straight into the questions. We've got a bit of time for some questions, and if you've got a burning question, put it on the app, and I'll try and get to it for you. The first question up, over to you, Naomi. We've got a question for Naomi. Given your unique breadth of experience across multiple industries, how seriously are traditional energy companies in addressing issues such as greenhouse gas emission reduction and climate change, in your opinion?
Oh, good first question. I think very seriously. It's not just a, you know, it's not a moral question. It's a cost question and a commercial challenge. and not just social licence to operate, but also the way that you can demonstrate to regulators that your project is environmentally acceptable and ecologically sustainable and meets all of the rigorous criteria that regulators have to administer under our various, acts and regs and pieces of legislation, depending what state and, jurisdiction we're in. So I, based on my experience in the oil and gas space, which I still am involved in, it's taken very seriously. There's a lot of effort put in, a lot of, emissions mitigation studies and workshops and effort to research emerging technology as well and try and allow, even new infrastructure that's being installed to allow for emerging technologies so that there's weight and space, there's less weight and space constraints on a platform for technology that might not be feasible for 10 or 20 years.
Awesome. Yeah, I might actually throw that question over to the other two industry reps that are here. Good chance to pump your tyres up and tell us all the good stuff that you're doing. So maybe over to you, Christo or Nick, if you'd like to respond to that question.
I want to say we take it very serious. The fact that we've already closed one of our power plants down last year is indication of that. The fact that we've got very clear plans to close both our base water as well as Loy Yang A operations in the next 10 years, 10, 12 years is also proof of that. But very important is that that at the same time we develop our renewables pipeline so we can replace that supply. That's quite critical. To make sure that we have that we can support the grid and do that responsibly, that's very important for us.
Yeah.
And look, maybe I'll just add, the focus on emissions reduction in any existing industry today is intense. It's an enormous focus for the whole number of reasons that Naomi, you just mentioned. It's a commercial imperative, it's a cost of operations and the social licence piece equally strongly. So no organisation cannot be trying to reduce emissions. The challenge for particularly some of the existing industries that we might represent here is you still need to continue to deliver the reliable energy, the affordable energy that society needs as we work through this transition. So it's absolutely an and equation and nothing other than that.
Awesome, thanks. The next question is probably you, Steve, might be best placed to answer this one. And it's, is there a level of anxiety of those working in the coal-fired power stations about a move to renewables? Obviously, you would hear a lot around the traps and what's your feeling about how coal workers are feeling about the industry shutting down?
Yeah, Tony, of course there's levels of anxiety about what next. I don't think people actually understand what their next job will be, moving out of the power industry, but there's always a level of anxiety about it. I mean, when Hazelwood shut down, that was one of the things that we actually trained most of the workers that come out of there to get nationally accredited qualifications. But we did notice that there was a lot of mental health issues, a lot of anxiety from those people who we had to support through the Trades and Labour Council. There is no doubt that there is a lot of anxiety out there. And these guys and girls who are working in the power industry, they know it's a sunset industry. And they're looking for where's the next jobs and do they pay the same? Am I going to be able to maintain my level of living? I've seen some of those guys and girls that come out of Hazelwood, they thought they were right there for a long, long time. I mean, Angie was actually making them promises. Some people were being recruited on the basis that, you'll be right for the next 5 years, and the next minute they were told, you're leaving, mate. As far as I'm concerned, that was an ambush on the community and an ambush on those workers. And yes, there were a shitload of mental health issues.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else want to respond to that question, Christo?
I think I'll just say, surely it's had an impact on people, especially some of the younger generation employees at Loy Yang A for sure when we made the announcements. But can I just say, I've got an amazing team of people on site. So the energy around what I've seen just over the last 18 months, what driven through our Target 92 strategy is really, really encouraging. And people are really committed and engaged to make sure that we can run through this transition responsibly, make sure we can support the grid, support the NEM. And we've given time use notification, so it gives us a nice window, or it gives us a good window of opportunity to plan this transition and make sure that our people are looked after through this process. Surely there's people that's disappointed, but it's important to understand that people are really engaged to make sure that we do the right things and we keep the plant in a good condition.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that never happened at Hazelwood, and I've got to say, you know, Energy Australia, your lawn, are doing it much better than they did.
Okay, and look, maybe if I could just add to that as a former coal worker also, that we wouldn't have been able to have this conference here in Traralgon 5 to 10 years ago. So that the community and the workforce belief is changing. It's been brought about by closure dates being imposed on the power stations, and until then, everybody was just saying, oh, it's just going to continue on as it is for ages. But from my perspective, I don't believe that coal workers want sympathy. They want certainty about what's going to take over and what they can plan for and what they can work towards for the future. If they don't want to transition, there's going to be plenty of work in rehabilitation of the sites, and to be honest, the average age of the workforce is fairly high anyway, so a lot of them will retire with coal before it shuts. But yeah, it's a different conversation in the community these days than it would have been 5 years ago, for sure. Chris Bowen talked of stability, coherence, and speed of transition. There are many methodologies to meet net zero, and most initiatives are top-down. How do panel members think they can socialise the benefits of the transition to make it faster, more coherent and equitable? That's a big question.
Look, I think I'd pick up there, Tony, this idea of allow the competitive market to work is one of the answers through that description of how it might unfold. We have potential industries that will emerge and could emerge in this region. We have existing industries that will transition and change. There are competitive forces that will allow those to happen in the most efficient way. And I think the strongest recommendation would have to try to work through that would be let that get on with in the way that a competitive market can do, with the least trying to do a top-down approach, because that's really picking winners.
Anybody else care to have a go at that one?
Well, yeah, Tony, I'll say something. First part is community engagement, right? The second part is both government at all levels, local, state, Commonwealth, and then obviously also the employers. You know what? They've just got to keep talking to one another. I don't see that happening at the moment. I mean, these conferences are great. Like you said, they wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. But really, there has to be an authority that can steer the ship. I don't see that happening at the moment.
I'd probably add to that. I think, similar to what Nick said, it's having more certainty to allow the competitive market to flourish. So in terms of having, in the offshore wind example, having renewables targets per state, some certainty around the assessment process and the award process to allow that competitive market to flourish and investment, to have confidence in investment so that can occur. So that it's not, as we were saying before, it's not change happening to people, because that's what would happen from the top-down approach.
Cool. A development opportunity, maybe. Hang on, I've lost it. Where did it go? Oh, yeah. No. SO knows how to drill wells. Are you interested in geothermal drilling and production for firming?
Oh man, you asked the guy who sells gas. Okay, it's a yes. Look, I don't have a great answer for that one. I mean, there's a bunch of technologies that I know SO we're looking at really closely. They are all over the world trying to pick the best insights. If there's a geothermal opportunity in Australia, I mean, that'd be really interesting.
We do have a bit of geothermal hanging around here, so there may be an opportunity. How does the regulator manage a potential conflict of interest between traditional generators and renewables? So that's a bit of a regulation question. If anybody has any insights into that.
Tony, I'm definitely not a specialist in terms of regulatory or regulations. And I'm trying to think, what specific is referred to. Maybe, if we can get more clarity, we can try and answer. But I don't think there's necessarily a clash or there's a concern around that. Let me rather just park it there. As I said, I don't have insight into the regulations in terms of exactly how that functions, but I don't see that as a problem.
Yeah, and that's okay.
I can add a little, and again, just from an environmental point of view, but I think regulators can only assess within the bounds of their remit of their legislation, so it's not so much a weighing up different energy types against each other. That's not their role. But I think it's a few years ago, there was a bit of a perception that renewables projects being clean energy would get a bit of an easier ride through the approvals process, and I think we've seen that's not the case, at all. Everything from the solar projects in northern WA to the challenges, that we're going through in the offshore wind space now.
Yeah, cool. Another question for Nick, probably. What's your views on the role of gas in the context of what Tony Wood mentioned yesterday about us running out of gas soon in Victoria? So he was pretty strong on the point that that there's not an endless supply there, and it's not going to last too long here in Victoria. I guess the question is, what's your view on that? Is that correct? Is that on the money or not?
Yeah, I did miss Tony yesterday, but I'm aware of some of the commentary he's shared in the and he's got a great profile and does thoughtful analysis. Look, I suppose the first point is don't see gas not being part of our energy transition system for a very long time, and so there is an ongoing role for gas. And Tony would put words in his mouth, but I think would see that gas would be part of the energy solution for quite a while, and certainly will be in southern Australia. There are challenges of where gas is and where gas needs to be, and so making sure that we align the decline in demand as it will occur with the decline in supply and have those matched is absolutely a challenge. But there are mechanisms to help keep those in balance. Pipeline expansions from other sources, and strategies to make sure that the demand decline and supply decline stay together. So look, that's not quite the perfect answer to what you're saying. There is going to be a decline in demand. There's going to be a decline in supply. We need to keep them stitched up.
So you're confident we've got enough to see us
well,
through?
We need to be able to continue to meet supply to match that demand. We absolutely need a regulatory environment that allows new supply to come on, because otherwise it will be messy. It will be a gap that opens up, and that's the situation we want to avoid. That will undermine the transition to renewables, because gas is supporting renewables through firming capacity.
There's a question here. What are the greenhouse gas emissions during the manufacturing stage of the renewable sector? And look, probably nobody's fully qualified to answer that question. Anybody like to have an opinion on, obviously there is some greenhouse gas emissions in manufacture of anything at the moment. Is it validated by the fact that we have a free energy source to drive it? It's a one-of maybe. Anybody want to elaborate a little bit on
Geez, hard-hitting questions. I don't have any numbers off the top of my head, but, you know, calculating the embodied carbon in any project is part of a standard EIA environmental impact assessment process now. So not just for renewables, but every type of energy source, it's a standard requirement that will help the government and the public understand the scale of environmental impacts. So it includes embodied carbon being, you know, everything from the construction of the steel that goes into turbines or blades, and all of the transport, all of the diesel use of the vessels that install the turbines, and throughout the whole project life, so all the O&M phase, all of decommissioning. So it is a holistic impact assessment that includes that.
Yeah, okay.
Tony, you're running the best panel here because we're getting into all these serious questions. I mean, it's back to this point that if we're going to have a transition that is genuinely the most efficient and the most economical, it's got to be one where the rules are clear, the regulatory positions are firm and certain, and then we just allow the competitive tension to ensure that we don't end up with the sort of circumstances you're talking about there where you know, bringing in infrastructure that's got a lot of embedded carbon is solving a problem.
So can I read into that the government's got a bit of work to do?
I think there's more we'll continue to see in the regulatory space, to get the certainty that we need.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Probably you, Steve. The traditional energy community are worried and scared by misinformation and negative media. How is the union addressing this, or how is the Trades and Labour Council addressing it?
Well, one of the things we try and do is, you know, rely on facts as opposed to the best rumour out there, you know. I can tell you straight out now, Tony, nuclear is not one of the options we're looking at. We know that's not good. But the reality is it's about people actually getting an understanding of where we're coming from and where we're going to. And there is no doubt that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And in real terms, mate, we're just going to have to bat it back every time we find it.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Just reading through, looking for other questions. Another one for Nick, maybe. SO plans to decommission offshore platforms, which in itself is a transition. What is SO doing to maximise the opportunities for workers in old industries via the decom project, and also work with emerging Gippsland offshore wind?
That's an excellent question. I mean, maybe a couple of quick themes on that is just to give a sense of the magnitude of that project, how enormous and long duration it will be to effectively decommission and remediate existing assets. I think we will have spent something like $2 billion just by the end of this year already on early decommissioning work. So principally things like plug and abandonment of wells offshore. There's an enormous amount of money that will be spent over quite a long period, well into the next decade and beyond. So that would be all work that's effectively done in situ or in the region, and will continue to be a significant source of employment and spend into the economy and so on for quite some time. And I think many of the skills that will be used in that industry are going to be skills that will be analogous with offshore wind. Certainly things like marine support and maintenance for offshore assets is something that this region's done for a long time, and it will continue to do so with the new industry that will emerge.
Yeah, thank you. Naomi, some think we are moving too fast. Others think we need to transition more quickly. Regardless, is there anything you are worried about that we are missing? In other words, 10, 20 or 30 years from now, what is the accepted biggest risk we should have anticipated? Not putting you on the spot. Yeah. So you've got to look 30 years into the future and tell us what we should have done today.
Just on the too fast, too slow thing, I think as an environmental scientist, one of the biggest frustrations I have is when environmental impact is used as a reason to oppose projects. And we see this you know, with Peter Dutton and the likes of Donald Trump all of a sudden caring about whales as a justification to oppose offshore wind projects. And like I was talking about earlier, everything we do has an impact, you know, and we need to acknowledge that renewable energy projects are not going to have no impact. Of course they will. But our energy needs to come from somewhere, you know, and as we know, coal is, you know, in a transition to come to an end. It's very hard to get environmental approval for a new gas project in Australia, you know, these days, and yet we still see opposition to renewable energy projects. So if I could communicate anything to, you know, the general community, it's that, you know, it's my job and, you know, a whole range of different specialists in many, many specialised fields to do a rigorous job of impact assessment and, you know, gather all that data and present it to the regulators. And even though our legislative framework and our green tape, it's not perfect, you know, I think we know that, and we know that streamlining isn't really there and it takes a very long time, and you know, we know there's issues with our EPBC Act and so on, and there's lots of, you know, plans in place to try and improve that, but it's all going to take time. And I think if I boiled it down, it would be, Australia is not perfect, but we have a rigorous environmental impact assessment process, and we just have to work within the bounds of the framework that we have, because we don't, it will take too much time. So I know that's not really asking the in 30 years question.
No, that's okay. That's okay. It's a look into the future. Probably have the last question now, and it's for Christo, I think. Can you explain the benefits of flexible operations in simpler terms and how it supports the transition to closure? So in other words, like generators used to be fixed output. Can you explain flexible operation and how that will assist the grid?
So Tony, in order for us to make space for renewables, particularly during high wind and sun periods, which is sun periods obviously in the middle of the day.
Yep.
And as we also see penetration of, in particular, rooftop solar coming along, we need to create the space for these renewables to be able to generate and dispatch onto the grid. Now, in order for that to happen, we need to reduce our output to make space for the renewables to come on and to generate and to effectively replace what we would have generated. So, I mean, primary energy cost for solar is nothing. If we can wind down, there's benefits in terms of burning less coal, obviously less CO2 emissions, etc. Now, what we're seeing already is that during peak days, during peak wind periods during the day, there's actually sufficient supply to meet demand. Now, in order for us to be able to accommodate that, we're going to have to even work harder than what we've had over the last 18 months to make sure we can even go lower. Yep. And what you would find, for instance, in some European countries that's already transitioned and also transitioning, going through a similar process, that you even get to a point where some of these units actually get shut down for periods. So what you do is you wind it down to zero, you go into a cold reserve state, and then when you need it to be dispatched to be able to meet, to fill the gap for what renewables can't supply, depending on obviously wind and solar, then you have to be able to start up and be able to supply that. Yeah. So we are looking at options. Technically, it's doable. There's definitely cost implications, but more importantly is to make sure that our people are on board and that they understand the transition and can support that. Yep. But we are working on that, and there's some more work to be done over the next couple of years.
Yeah. And just so people understand, the coal generators are big beasts, and they take a bit to you can't just push the button and start them up again. They take a bit to wind up and
Let me tell you about gas, Tony.
Well, yeah, maybe. Look, we'll leave the questions there. I just wanted to ask the panellists if they wanted to make a brief closing comment, something that's been burning that you didn't get a chance to discuss, or anything. If now's the time. If there's something really burning that you wanted to say.
I feel like I just said my heartfelt plea.
Yep.
No, but I think, the future's optimistic. It will be challenging, but, we can definitely do it. And I think, there's, like we've seen over the last few days, there's a real sense of optimism here and progression and a willingness to not let change happen to you, but to be part of the change. And I think it's really inspiring for the rest of the country, actually. I think Gippsland's really leading the way.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about something here that's at the heart of the political, social, economic and environmental issues of our time, and it's an awesome space to bring as much intellectual horsepower, skill, people and effort as we possibly can, and that's the only way we'll get an acceptable outcome.
I just want to say from our side, power generation is still an exciting business to be in. We still need people to make sure we can transition to closure and do that safely and do that well. In fact, we're currently recruiting operators. We've got a very active apprenticeship program, which we plan to continue with over the next couple of years. So in fact, it's not like we actually need people. And we need committed, well-qualified people to take us through this safely and to support not just Victoria, but Australia through this process.
Yep. So positive. Yep. Steve?
Yeah, look, I think what we've been doing at this conference and, all the subjects we've gone across, I think it's been great. We need to continue to do it. And just because we've got a captive audience here, and I will tell you, I'm a unionist, and one of the things that, we do a lot of good things, but we've got to do better. We've got to do better on some of the social issues. And some of the social issues I look at is the way we treat our First Nations people. And the other one that really gets me annoyed is domestic violence. We need to all do more about that. So if you do anything today, go away from here, think about that. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Steve. And look, thanks very much to our panellists. I'd just like to close, if Dan could chuck up that, a little bit of some of you may have seen this on social media. So my granddaughter, 3-year-old granddaughter, wrote me a Father's Day card, and this is the reason why we need to transition and so that she can have a future and she can keep going. But yeah, you have a silly nose just like a snake. So I'd like to close from old Snake Nose here. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you to our panellists. It's been amazing, and yeah, look forward to the next session.
Thank you, Snake Nose. Not going to let that go. Understand there's a bit of transition, pardon the pun, as people move to different venues. We've got some rapid fire things coming up next. That was a longer session that we had for 1 hour. We've got a series of 15 minutes now. The first one, I've got Christian Stefani side stage, and I am announcing you Christian because Darren McCubbin has gone missing somewhere, and if you do see Darren or hear him, tell him he should be up here on stage and announcing Christian. You'll see in your agenda that Karen Ellis was our speaker this afternoon. Karen is the CEO of South Gippsland Shire and is unwell at the moment, so Christian has stepped in. So Christian has done a great job to absolutely memorise Karen's presentation. Please make Christian very, very welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much. I'd love to say I've memorised everything word for word, so for those that want to film this, and I'll show Karen when I get back to the office. Yeah, unfortunately Karen is an apology today, so first I'd like to do a slight acknowledgement here of our traditional custodians of the Gunai Kurnai and the land in which we meet, expanding and extending that also to a topic on South Gippsland, and for us the Gunai Kurnai have recognition there as well as the Bunurong. So we're really happy to hear and see the work that Gunai Kurnai in particular have been doing in supporting of this conference, but also the work in partnership that they've done with South Gippsland and many of our communities in our area. A thank you to them. This, I'll already stuff it up. But just an image here that I know Karen really enjoyed when she was preparing our presentation. It's ours now, because I co-own this now, as of today. An image, and it probably depicts a bit of a brand of South Gippsland, well known for our rolling green hills, and just seeing that ray of sunshine or light coming through over the last few days. We haven't seen a lot of this. It's been very intermittent, and unfortunately a lot of our community has been impacted by the recent storms. So the very topic about transitioning to renewable energy, very pertinent at the moment for us, and we're seeing communities actually responding with projects that look at renewable energy resilience. And supporting the communities through this process. So we're looking forward to more of those less windy and brighter days ahead for South Gippsland. For those that are familiar with South Gippsland, relatively small population in comparison to other regions, and I won't bore you into many statistics here, but we do have some uniqueness attached to us. We're well known, as I've mentioned, about our landscape. But the communities that we have are a little bit different to other areas of Gippsland and in regional Victoria. So we have about 28 communities. We don't really have that regional centre in the sense of a Warrigal or a Traralgon or a Sale. We have a commercial and civic precinct and centre in Leongatha, where a lot of our growth has been directed over years and linked, of course, to agriculture and food production. But relatively small population base. So a lot of our community is actually quite dispersed through the region, and I'll show in a moment why we're a little bit unique when it comes to activities on land, and in particular how we protect and support agriculture. How do we find that balance with renewable energy developments in our own backyard? We do have an economy that is well centred on agriculture and food production, and it's of national significance. So much so that in terms of dairy production, we have about 10% of the dairy that's produced comes out of South Gippsland. I know Ben earlier today from Food and Fibre Gippsland talked about the importance and significance of food production in Gippsland. And we really need to recognise what we currently do now, but also understand what pressures come with future growth in agriculture and opportunity as we see business and industry transition, not just to renewable energy, but also in terms of geographic location in Victoria and other parts of the state, and looking for areas that aren't as impacted to climate change, where significant and regular rainfall is quite important to them. And South Gippsland, being on that peri-urban fringe of Melbourne and those other growth corridors, has a lot of competing demands on it. It's not just one area. And a little fun fact for us that we always share is that for that 31,000 people that live in South Gippsland, we have 7 cows for each individual that is there, so a much bigger population with our bovine friends there. There's a quiz for that later too, so just memorise that one. This map here is one that we actually provided as part of a submission to the VicGrid draft transmission plan guidelines, and also the release of the renewable energy zones that have come out. A lot of interest in our community, in particular about onshore wind and about potential development and transmission in South Gippsland. A lot of the focus has been around transmission to offshore wind, in particular in Wellington Shire. But this probably illustrates a little bit of the complexity that we have in South Gippsland and that uniqueness around dwelling density on rural land, on farming land. And it also reflects probably that European settlement makeup of farming practices, where we had quite a lot of smaller properties with dwellings located on them, quite dispersed through our region. So this map here shows in the yellow dots the dwellings on our rural land outside of towns. Roughly about 50% of our population lives outside of towns. They live on rural land. And the pink hue that's applied to it is a proximity buffer of 1 kilometre from the dwelling. So based on turbines being allocated on land, under legislation there's I guess a distance of 1 kilometre that needs to be met from a dwelling. Doesn't mean that this removes all opportunities for development of onshore wind in our area, but it needs to be really carefully considered about location and the appropriateness also of where we see complementary uses to agriculture, not competing. As you can see from there, there's probably not too many spots left in South Gippsland that you're not going to have a direct impact on a landowner that needs to be considered in this. And so something that we just wanted to share that illustrates that. The orange dots have the Bald Hills Wind Farm and the Tura Wind Farm, which are existing projects that have been up and running for quite some time now. Delburn Wind Farm, obviously at the north and in Latrobe, is also earmarked to be developed, and there are also projects on our neighbouring municipalities. The The challenge for us in terms of I guess facilitating growth is really being prepared for it. So a lot of work's gone into understanding our makeup, understanding what the impacts and opportunities are. And as has been presented in previous presentations, we've done some very good work in collaboration with partners in terms of local government. So a big shout out to Wellington Shire Council with the leadership and work they've done on their impact and readiness study. We're very fortunate that partnering with Latrobe City Council, we've also delivered our own this year, which was adopted not too long ago, well supported by the RDA Gippsland Committee and RDV, so thank you to them. That really is painting a picture for us that is there to understand what land use planning requirements we may need, how we link into what's a very strategic opportunity for us in terms of the ports that we have in South Gippsland at Barry Beach, their significance to our whole region in terms of operations and maintenance for offshore and renewable energy, but also in terms of workforce and where will they be located. So a fair bit of work's gone into understanding that, and that study's been very well received by our council and community. It's setting a bit of guidance in terms of actions for us to take, especially around understanding the business supply chains, how they work with existing industry, how we can complement the skill sets that we have, the education and training requirements that are there, and again, ongoing advocacy and partnership that we do need at local government level. Also, we've completed an industrial land use study and have a draft strategy ready to be adopted in the new year. That's looking at the capacity we have and readiness of industrial land sites for commercial and manufacturing use in South Gippsland. Really important for us, again, about being ready for what the growth will bring with it. One point that we often talk about is partnerships externally, but as an organisation, we've actually worked really heavily with our local leadership group in council to make sure we understand the services that we deliver as local government. How will we be ready for potential growth in population and workforce and new industry coming in? How do we work with them? So a little word cloud there on the screen that just reflected a bit of a sentiment and feedback from some of our staff, our leadership group, about what they see as the opportunity. Again, nothing that surprises us. It's very similar to what we're hearing all the time, reflecting very much what's been on the agenda for this conference. For us, we do have a shortfall of industrial land, so we've been advocating to government and also with industry about making sure that we are land and infrastructure ready. Residential land, commercial land and industrial land, very important. At the ports at Barry Beach, and you'll hear more about ports very shortly from other speakers, but we have about 60% of all the zoned industrial land available located at and around the port's location at Barry Beach, which makes it very significant for us as a municipality, but also for Gippsland as a region to capitalise and see how we activate that area. It's very important for us. We have an undersupply of industrial land due to other growth and other marketable constraints that we've had in towns, but that to us is something that we need to plan and prepare for and activate and support the port operators who do a wonderful job in making sure that they realise what their needs are and that we can accommodate, hopefully, a very new and large workforce that's located in Gippsland, in particular South Gippsland and Wellington, to I guess, make the most of those opportunities. To illustrate a point around how significant the ports are, and this is an image I need to obviously make a shout out to Urban Enterprise and Kurt Ainsar and his team for developing the impact and readiness study. This shows the travel distances from the ports in terms of where potential workforce would come from if they were looking to reside more locally. We're well aware of the fly-in, fly-out, drive-in, drive-out opportunities that exist with workforce of this nature, especially into construction, but in terms of operations and maintenance and that 30-year plus or longer duration, we're trying to understand what are the needs that we need to meet when it comes to having land use available for development, for residential development, and obviously in a housing shortage or crisis, as we've been known, the challenges are even more profound for us not having that regional centre. And we've got to understand what kind of impacts it may have on some of our smaller communities that are more located around there. We have a kind of a bookend here in that Corner Inlet community between Foster and Yarram in terms of being ideal. The purple-coloured zones there indicate a travel time of up to 20 minutes to the ports. The teal colour is up to 40 minutes, and the yellow would be up to about an hour in terms of travel. And probably understanding that that's probably around the limitations around who would be willing to travel that level of distance to work at that facility. And it probably shows where the pressures are and where the opportunities are in terms of developing the region here for us in South Gippsland and Wellington, and getting that land use and infrastructure ready to accommodate those needs. So it always helps probably understand just where we might see growth planning directed. Partnerships are very important, and I know they've been spoken about quite often today, and acknowledging those that are formed within industry, and obviously the launch of GOA probably illustrates that even more so today with Minister Bowen coming down. We've been looking and working very closely at a local level in terms of partnerships that we're doing with community and business, our industry, the ports operators, our fellow local government representatives that have been working with us in this journey, and it's been something that we've seen a lot of great feedback come back around understanding what the opportunities are. So for community, we run an annual stakeholder roundtable in Leongatha that brings in representatives from different industries, sectors and community groups, business associations, tourist groups, health services, education, etc., to understand what pressures there might be for them, what are the opportunities if there were to be significant growth in population. Now, that 31,000 people that I mentioned before for South Gippsland, if we were to see a very conservative figure of maybe anywhere between 500 to 1,000 people working at the ports in operations and maintenance, again, only half of those bring their families with them. You start understanding the multiplier effect that we might have. We might end up seeing around 20% growth in our workforce just based in this new industry and the support services that then go along with that. Where do we put them? Where will they be living? So probably more pressure on higher density development occurring in some of our smaller communities that we probably haven't been used to or seeing before. Really important that we take the community on the journey and understand how does that affect them, their town character, that they hold as a very important part of who makes up or what makes up their communities and their townships. We've worked really closely with our port operators, again, Barry Beach Marine Terminal, Cube, who operate down there, Ben Anthony, the Anthony family at Port Anthony. They've been great to work with and understand, again, what are the things that they need that council can support them. 1 minute. I'm getting the wind up, so we'll go there. Opportunities, and probably just mentioned a few of those already, but in terms of what's happening in our backyard, I mentioned some of our developments that we already have in terms of renewable energy, but those potential new projects really carefully need to be understood and how we support them. The ports are just so critical to South Gippsland and to Gippsland as a region. I think the activation of those and how we benefit from those need to be done in partnership with all levels of government, but also need to be done in a way that community engagement brings the community along with us, so we understand where the opportunities may be needing greater support or where they may even fall over. So overall for Gippsland, there's some significant opportunities that South Gippsland's involved in. We're really happy to be playing a part, and our lasting image there. I guess we're working towards a much brighter future. And I'm hoping to see more of that sunshine come out after recent days so we can enjoy places like the Prom again in a safe way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you to South Gippsland. Thank you very much. And look, and just can I say, it's been terrific working with South Gippsland. They've been wonderful in the conference, and a lot of the success has been due to their energy and enthusiasm. So thanks, mate. Take that back to the team. Let's move on. We're just having a little bit of a break here as we move in, and I'm going to bring Tony Cantwell out to start the next session. Tony.
Thanks very much, Darren, and good afternoon, everybody. Before I begin today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today, the Gunai-Kurnai, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Today's topic is navigating the approach, opportunities and challenges for Australia's ports in preparing for offshore wind. Obviously, we're well placed in South Gippsland and Gippsland more broadly with the port opportunities that we have before us. Our first speaker today will be Captain Ashley McDonald, who is the Director of Ports and Supply Chain with Direct Infrastructure. To introduce Ashley, Ashley is a former marine pilot, harbour master, port executive with over 30 years' experience in the maritime industry. And he serves as a director of the Gippsland Skies Offshore Wind Consortium, which is one of the 12 projects in Gippsland. So to get underway, I'd like to welcome Ashley to the stage for his presentation, which will be followed by Andrew Jenkins and then a panel discussion and opportunities to submit questions. So we'll come back and have that discussion shortly. So please welcome Ashley.
Well, g'day everyone, and thank you for coming to this session on ports, navigating the approach, the challenges and opportunities that exist for ports, Australian ports in offshore wind. It's great to see you here. It's a very important conversation. As you would have heard, if you don't have a port, you don't have a project. I have the distinct pleasure of working for Direct Infrastructure, an Australian renewable energy developer. I came back from working in New Zealand a couple of years ago to join a couple of friends, and we're having a great time as part of the transition. And as part of Direct Infrastructure, we are part of the consortium that is Gippsland Skies Offshore Wind. So we've got a 2.5 gigawatt project here in the Gippsland offshore, and we are partnered with Reventus Power, Mainstream Renewable Power, and AGL. I'm very proud to be part of that consortium. We believe we've brought together the right companies to make a great consortium and have success in producing power for Victoria for decades to come. So, yeah. About ports, I want to just talk about this briefly in my talk today, just for a few minutes, and then get into the conversation, because I think we're past the stage where one person has knowledge to pass on to everyone, and everyone's got to get the technical details from one person. I think we're mature enough as an industry now to know that some of the dilemmas we're facing are real, and they're not solved by one person, and it's a conversation that we need to have around how we're going to solve some of these issues. So I'll keep it fairly brief, and then we'll move on to talk about a conversation. Hopefully there's some good questions come through on the Hoover app, and we'll do it that way. But I want to talk about briefly marshalling port options for the Gippsland offshore wind. And in no particular order, I just want to talk about briefly, when I say the word marshalling port, some of you will understand that to mean construction port, and so by that I just mean the port where components come in, they might undergo some final assembly, and then they go out to the field to be actually constructed onto the wind farm. So that's what I mean by a marshalling port. There are a few ports in Victoria and in the region that can support offshore wind. Most of you will know what ports they are. They're listed there. There is currently, of the 25 gigawatts of proposed offshore wind amongst the 12 licensees in Gippsland, there's currently no real capacity within Victoria or the region to marshal any of these projects. And what I mean by that is that if you look at all the factors that we require from port to support marshalling, those factors don't exist in any port at present. So every single port that could support offshore wind does need some work done, and varying degrees of work, obviously, depending on the port we're talking about. I guess I'll talk about Hastings, the name that no one wants to mention at the moment. Hastings, the Victorian Renewable Energy Terminal at Hastings obviously has faced some obstacles, and we will see a referral made early next year according to the Port of Hastings, and that will go through the process, and we'll see where that lands. But it does have a massive impact on what the projects are doing, as you well imagine. There are other ports in Victoria which can support marshalling offshore wind. Geelong, very briefly, a private port, some capacity right now and a planned capacity of 19 hectares within the next 3 or 4 years. They've purposely designed a project, Oyster Cove, which you would know is minimal environmental impact in order to get that done in a timely fashion. I've listed Melbourne there. Melbourne has constraints on trade, and there is, we understand, very little likelihood that Melbourne will support offshore wind in marshalling, but we want to keep an open mind to that and keep it open as an option. If a window should open up, we want to be able to take advantage of that in a multiple port strategy. Bell Bay in Tasmania. Bell Bay is an interesting port. It's a deep water port. It has a lot of things going for it. It's challenging in terms of space, but there is potential to expand and make that a port that can support a part of the scope for an offshore wind project. The challenge with Bell Bay, of course, is that we need to work out who would finance that. I've listed there Corner Inlet. Corner Inlet, as you would well know, is a very shallow port. Vessels, have to be able to get in there on a draft of about 4.5, 5 metres max, and that doesn't support marshalling of offshore wind with the present technology. I say that because there is a company that is looking at a model of feeder barges being used, and If that technology and that method can be proven, as is currently being tried in the US, then there is potentially the option of being able to do some scope of foundations out of Corner Inlet using the existing channel depth and width, which would be a very exciting prospect if that were possible. But again, that's only part of the scope and has yet to be proven. And then we look further afield, we've got right up the coast there, you've got Port Kembla, which has planning a terminal which will ultimately be for floating offshore wind to support the Illawarra and potentially Hunter zones. But in the short term or in the intermediate term, it could potentially support projects down this way. Of course, distance is very important. We're talking about marshalling offshore wind, and that is going to count against them on an economic basis. So that's basically the ports that are in the region in terms of marshalling. And I guess I've been a port operator for many years, and I guess when you're a port operator, you look at, there's three ways you generally make money. You lease land. The land that's closest to the water's edge is the most expensive land. Everybody wants that land. But you lease land, you charge berthage on ships that are alongside the wharf for however many hours they're alongside your wharf. You charge berthage, and then you charge wharfage, which is a rate for the cargo that goes across the wharf. And ports make their money by doing those three things generally. There's other ways as well, but they're the general things. And then when you want to invest in new infrastructure or upgrading your infrastructure, you've got to write a business case that will obviously return that investment that you're spending. And in the terms of offshore wind, if you stack it up against other trades that ports look at for their return, it doesn't compare favourably in a lot of cases, because if you think about offshore wind, the construction phase or marshalling phase of an offshore wind farm per project is probably 2 to 3 years. If you manage to get a few projects back to back, you might get up to 10, 15 years perhaps, maybe. But you're going to need at least probably a 20-year business case to be able to support the kind of dollars we're talking about to produce an offshore wind marshalling port. And that's where it becomes challenging particularly for private ports, to make that business case. In the case of, if you take Geelong as an example, a private port, there's going to be a gap. And what I mean by that is there's a gap between when the money needs to be spent on CapEx to actually prepare that port for offshore wind marshalling, and when the projects are actually going to reach FID to be able to actually go and commit to leasing a terminal for the construction of their project. And the gap is what we really all know about as being the biggest problem to move forward with these projects. And that's where the government needs to step in, of course. Gippsland ports, sorry, I will show that image in a moment. Gippsland ports play a very important role in offshore wind, and it's obvious that operations and maintenance is, the Corner Inlet is the place to do operations and maintenance. It is the closest to the site by a long way. It has existing facilities which have supported the oil and gas industry for decades, and for a lot of reasons it just makes sense to do operations and maintenance out of Corner Inlet. There are no other ports that are within a comparable distance. There are some ports that we would use if we had to, but I think it's clear to say every proponent has a preference to use Corner Inlet, and therefore South Gippsland will get a lot of benefits in the long term from the jobs and the businesses that will be created from the operations and maintenance phase of these projects. The gap is the most challenging thing, and that's what I say for us to talk about in our question time, in our panel time. The Victorian government acknowledges that the Port of Hastings decision earlier this year was a setback. They've acknowledged that as part of the CFD process, they're going to need to be able to provide some certainty to proponents in order that they can participate in that CFD process. In other words, the Victorian government is going to have to underwrite investment in port infrastructure, whether or not it's Hastings, in order to allow these projects to move forward to meet that 2032 2 gigawatt target. Now, the challenge becomes, what if that port is not in Victoria? And so the question then becomes, well, what role does the federal government have in providing that certainty for these projects to reach FID on the basis that they have a port terminal that can marshal the projects? And that is a key question. No one has the answer to that right now, but the federal government and state government are both involved in having an evaluation of what their role is, potentially, in this gap, solving this gap problem between needing to spend the CapEx on port infrastructure and having FID to commit to the port capacity required for your project. I'll leave it there because my colleague Andrew is going to talk about Gippsland ports and a bit more about the local content part of the exciting part of these projects as it comes to marine and ports. And I'll show you this picture because what has this got to do with offshore wind? I used to be a volunteer captain on a ship that went around the world doing aid work, and this is a picture of people holding hands with First Nations people. This was in Kaohsiung in Taiwan. We're holding hands with First Nations people and learning a traditional dance. And I think we are at a stage in offshore wind in Victoria where we need to hold hands. We're no longer sort of competing like this. We need to actually hold hands and sort it out together. We need to solve these problems together. And of course, our First Nations are a part of solving the issue and helping us move forward. So with that, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I look forward to having a conversation about this challenge as we go forward with the session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ashley. And now to our second speaker, who I'd like to introduce now, and then we'll follow that with, whilst Andrew does a bit of a brief intro of himself, we will then shift towards some of the questions that have come through, so it's a bit more of a conversation around ports. So there's already a number of questions that have come through, but if you've got additional questions from Ashley's presentation, please send them through now, and then I'll help facilitate those questions. So I'd like to now welcome Andrew Jenkins, who is the Business Development Manager with Bhagwan Marine. To introduce Andrew, he has over 20 years' experience in the marine and offshore industry and is a shipbuilder by trade, with spending 12 years up in Dampier working on one of the key projects being Chevron's Gorgon project. So please welcome Andrew to discuss his experience in marine. I've got a fan club. Good to see. Yeah, and it's growing, thanks Teresa. So now I'd like to hand over to Andrew to do a little bit of a brief intro of yourself, and then we'll invite Ashley back out to answer some of these questions that have come through. So over to you.
Thanks, Nate. Am I on?
Yep.
Good. I just thought I'd give a brief introduction of my background and my experience in Western Australia around ports and the general supply chain that supports that. So, like Tone said, I spent 12 years in Dampier. I was the shipyard manager there, and the shipyard was adjacent to the main supply base, which supported the Northwest Shelf. I was lucky enough, or unlucky enough, I guess, to go through the boom and bust cycle of the oil and gas. It all sort of fell over and went backwards there around about 2014. And when I got there in 2006, it was in a bit of a stagnant mode. So it boomed right up through the likes of Gorgon, through the price of iron ore. The ports in Dampier were extremely busy. So it was one of the big challenges going through that period. The pressure on supply chain, skilled labour, being able to access it. Dampier, for those who don't know, is northwest Western Australia. It's quite remote, far more so than Gippsland. That being said, it's had a gas industry, an oil industry, and iron ore, salt industry for many years. So the supporting trades and the supply chain, the supporting services, is actually reasonably well established. Where I know the time that I've spent in Bass Strait, that supply chain with the marine or the port expertise is not there to the level that we're going to need. So that was my time in Dampier. I left Dampier in 2018, and I joined a vessel company working out of Barry Beach for 6 years, and the last couple of years I jumped ship, pardon the pun, and so I'm still sort of actively operating out of Barry Beach. From a marine perspective, as a vessel operator, Our supply chain is it's quite unique. So it doesn't matter which port we operate in Australia, the supply chain is not there to help survey our vessels, to the OEMs of the vessels, they're all built overseas. So from the vessel operations perspective, those OEMs are still sort of going to need to come in, and sort of don't see an issue accessing those skills. It's more the day-to-day, again from a vessel point, the trades that we will need. That's sort of my background. I thought I'd run through that to prompt any questions. I won't pretend to be the port expert for offshore wind, that's for sure. There's still a lot for me to learn about how we actually construct and store and transship and do whatever we do with the turbines. But from a vessel side of things, happy to try and answer any questions.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And we might now bring back Ashley as well, and I think it's probably, as you're making your way back to the chairs, opportune time to just establish your Gippsland credentials. Ashley, I think, grew up in Newborough, and Andrew in Sandy Point. So for people from Gippsland in the audience, I feel like we've accepted you even that little bit more with where you've grown up. So I might shift to some of the questions that have come through, and it might be an opportunity for Andrew to elaborate or contribute your thoughts, because I know some of the topics have been covered with Ashley's presentation. The first question is around Barry Beach. Could Barry Beach be upgraded to host offshore wind projects, seeing that Hastings has missed out? Yep, start with you, Ashley. Yep.
No. Well, it could be, yes. So Barry Beach or Port Anthony in Corner Inlet, it's potentially feasible to dredge the 10 million cubes of sand required to get down to a depth which would support the marshalling of offshore wind. I guess the Victorian government would need to have the appetite for that, because it's a significant investment. It's a Ramsar wetland, and then if there isn't that appetite for it at the Victorian government level, then it's not going to get private investment. So, and the Victorian government owns the channel, and therefore they would be the only ones that could recoup their investment in dredging by undertaking that. So I guess it's a bit of a moot point, because unless the government is really behind the idea of dredging Corner Inlet, it's no point really talking about it.
Yep. Great. Can you talk through some of the specific trades required to run ports?
Yeah, I can do that. The scale of what I understand about the offshore wind in particular, but from the oil and gas. Barry Beach Port, for example, Port of Hastings, or what's there with Blue Scope, Bell Bay, currently probably have half a dozen forklifts and a couple of cranes. When we get to the scale of the wind turbines, you're going to have 200 forklifts and 20, 30 cranes, heavy lift equipment. So diesel mechanics, everything's going electronics these days. So the electronics techs, the right through to the vessels, the trades that support the ports, woolies, IGA, all of the food stores that go out on the boat. The guys are living at sea for 4 and 5 weeks at a time. Laundromats, surveyors, all of those supply chain are needed to support it, and we'll have to scale accordingly.
Thanks, Andrew. Another one perhaps for you, Andrew, around vessels. Given the vessels for construction of the offshore wind farms will come from overseas, what roles will Australian fill on these vessels? And a second to that question is, there was another question around whether or not Australia should purchase those vessels to enable that construction?
I want a job on one when they get here, so I'll be putting my hand straight up to go and have a look out there. They're really cool assets. To be honest, I probably don't know that just yet. Typically in Australia, all of the vessels that operate here are manned by Australian Union, and the international vessels that have come to the country to do big dredging scopes, to do construction for oil and gas, they are manned by Australians. So Australians will play a part in these vessels from a seafaring perspective, down to the O&M vessels, or the vessels that support those construction vessels, so the crew transferring the stores and things that need to be run out to these boats, even down to the small vessels. They're all vessels that Australians will own and operate ultimately, so it will play a big part in the vessel side of things. We've got a lot to learn. I don't quite know how that transition will happen at this stage, you know, whether our seafarers go and do time in Europe or Asia, or the expertise come from Europe and Asia when the assets arrive in Australia. We'll have a lot of the skill sets, but the actual construction aspect of it, I'm not the expert. So.
Yep.
I think it'd be fair to say, as Andrew said, that there's it's a highly skilled role to be on these construction vessels. It's not something you can just get on board and help out with. It's going to take significant amount of investment in training of seafarers to be able to meet that need. And then the question about, can we build our own vessels? Well, you could underwrite the investment in vessels, but again, you've still got the same problem with seafarers that can actually operate those vessels, because it is a lot of skill involved in operating the construction vessels.
And so this one is perhaps for you, Ashley. How do you think Victorians will view the economic opportunity associated to ports going to Port Kembla or Bell Bay? Is it not reneging on social licence?
Yeah, I think it would be a very, very sad for the regional Victoria in particular to miss out on the investment that marshalling port would bring to Victoria. I think the Victorian government would be very sad to not be able to support the infrastructure that's required to marshal these projects. I think that they obviously got all their fingers and toes crossed around Hastings, and then, you know, let's face it, if it's not Hastings, it's a mixture of other ports, and it's not going to be only Victorian ports. And even if Hastings does get up, it's going to be a mixture of ports, some of which are not Victorian. And so, yeah, it's a good point. I think the Victorian government will be working very, very hard to make sure this referral crosses its T's and dots its I's. If anyone's really interested in the question around Hastings and hasn't been down there, it's a great place to visit, and you'll see just how, I guess, you know, it's a drop in the ocean in the scheme of, I'm not an environmental person, but I think it's a highly modified area in the scheme of a massive wetland, and it just seems to make sense to do it in Hastings, in my view.
Great, thanks, Ashley. Sorry, the questions are just jumping around a little bit. Could you please expand on the American method being tested that would make Corner Inlet more feasible?
I know a little bit about it, but you might know more, so I'll let you answer the second part. But Maersk Offshore Wind, as they're now called, have, I guess, conceptualised a method whereby they use a different type of jack-up vessel that would stay on station the whole time, so it would just move from one turbine site to the next and not go to port. And it would have a slot in the middle of the vessel, so a hollow sort of, if you imagine a vessel that's U-shaped, so it's got a big gap in the middle, and that gap is filled by a feeder barge which can drive in and basically dock onto that jack-up construction vessel, and that feeder barge would be the one that goes back and forth to port, and they're claiming that they can achieve a 30% reduction in time frame for construction using that method. That's a 30% efficiency gain. So that method, we'll be watching obviously what happens closely in the US. It was partly come up with that method to get around the Jones Act, which required US flag vessels to be used. And it may have some application in Australia. I'd be excited to see how that transpires.
Great. Andrew, did you want to add?
Yeah, that particular model and scope that's taking place in America is still a large vessel, still deep water draft. So it doesn't really open up the Gippsland ports in that sense, unless we turn them into construction ports. But it is something that's done a lot in Australia, transshipping. Not with offshore wind, but MinRes have just started a massive new project in Western Australia. So again, scaled, but there's probably no reason that components couldn't be broken out and run out to a mothership or a construction vessel. The economics of it and the commercial sense, I wouldn't know, but theoretically, yes. I know that a lot of the ports in Australia are old. They've been around forever. Again, drawing on Dampier, for example, that port wasn't designed and built to do the construction work that it's done over the last 20 years. So it's had to adapt. It's had to change, and where the port can't change and the draft can't change, the vessel's changed. The process on how we build things and how we did it. Companies in town, for example, come along and buy a 750-tonne mobile crane. Now all of a sudden it's a heavy load-out port where at one stage it wasn't. So that throw enough money at it, no worries, we can do anything. Yeah. But
Yeah, the feeder barge method was not, to be clear, was not come up with for the problem solving of accessing shallow ports. It's just that I know that Cube wouldn't mind me mentioning that they are investigating a shallower barge that could potentially be fed in and out of Corner Inlet. Now that's something that it's a concept that hasn't been proven, but it is a concept that they are working on. And obviously, if it can be proven, at least for part of the scope, it's not going to be for turbines, but if it can be for part of the scope for a project, then that is an exciting proposition to open up Corner Inlet to some of the marshalling, at least for parts of the foundations, perhaps.
Great. Another question has come through as, is the 9 gigawatt of offshore wind target in Victoria sufficient to convince other port operators which haven't received government funding to start investing in port enhancement now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I spend quite a lot of time in Tasmania. We have other vessels and other scopes down there, and part of my time there is around Bell Bay and the manufacturing. There's a lot of noise, I guess, on the hydrogen, the green methanol. So they want more power. It's in their best interest as a bigger group, as a wider group, to support that for the long-term result, I guess.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm not sure if I'll be pronouncing this wrong, so please feel free to jump in and correct my pronunciation. The Ichthys project had an overspend of greater than $5 billion US, partly as a result of delays due to union holds over tugboats and other vessel activity. How do we alleviate this issue in offshore wind? Thank you to whoever submitted that.
I think this one's for Andrew, but I would just say my experience of working with unions in Australia in the waterfront is engage very early and bring them along for the journey, but it's not going to be without its challenges.
It's not going to be without its challenges, that's for sure. Really, it's not going to fall necessarily on us as vessel operators. It will be the client, the developer. It's a challenging question. I think watch this space.
Great. I'll merge two questions into one because they've come through. You've kind of already spoken on other ports and those opportunities, but these two questions that have come through is Portland not an option, and why is Lakes Entrance not included in potential ports list?
Yeah, Portland's a great little port. It has a bustling trade. It has many cargoes that go through the port. It's a private port. Those trades are long-term trades. They don't have any I don't think any visibility of those trades disappearing anytime soon. There's a lot of revenue that is made from those trades. As a private port, if you've got a choice between a trade that derives good revenue for your investors, for your shareholders, then why would you give that up for the hope of possibly attracting a project or two to come through and use your port and then require that port to undergo significant upgrades? Because, as I said, there's no wharf in Australia right now that can handle what we're trying to do here. So, Portland would require significant upgrades, and there just isn't the space to marshal offshore wind without kicking out a whole bunch of trades that that provide employment and bring financial or economic prosperity to the whole region around Portland. So, and Lakes Entrance, we're just not talking about reality when we talk about the kind of scale of what's proposed, being able to be fitted into a smaller, much shallower port without the infrastructure to support it.
I'll merge another two questions in together if I can. Will developers be able to construct projects and use port facilities in parallel, but also with the Bass Strait decommissioning of the offshore oil and gas platforms, will that affect the Barry Beach Marine Terminal and Port Anthony to support offshore wind?
Depends on timing. I guess it would, yeah, absolutely. The decommissioning is going to take up a lot of space. So if the decommissioning is happening at the same time that we want to start working out at Barry Beach, then yeah, there's quite a lot of land there. It could expand, but the infrastructure that's there now is going to be chewed up by one or the other. It's not just the decommissioning project that's happening there now. There's a few other drilling campaigns, there's a few other survey scopes that'll happen over the next few years. So it's quite a busy area, Bass Strait, from an offshore perspective over the next few years. I just thought of the previous question about how we can potentially stop delays, like we saw with this project and Chevron and all those projects. We've got a real shortage internationally now on offshore tonnage, on offshore vessels. Again, throw enough money at it, we can probably build a lot of them really quickly. But there's a long lead time on vessels. There's a lot of new technology coming through on powering the vessels, on meeting a lot of the IMO standards and the like. So, will we see delays from vessel and vessel availability? Again, depends on timing. But those vessels aren't out there at the moment.
I probably should just add, someone asked about Lakes Entrance, and I didn't mean to shut it down entirely. Right throughout Gippsland, there are small ports that will play a part in hosting tugs and other vessels that will do a lot of the lifting, not lifting in the literal sense, but will play a role in offshore wind, including in the development phase. So there's a role for every port in the region. It's just not a marshalling port option.
With potential port locations being nominated, have there been assessments completed to inform the viability and or the approval pathways required to progress the options for construction and upgrades?
Which ports for that for, sorry?
Beg your pardon?
Which ports?
With potential ports that have been nominated.
Sorry, can
Sorry,
you repeat the
I'll
question?
repeat the question, yeah, sorry.
Assessments complete. Okay, got it here. Yeah, assessments completed to inform the viability and on approvals pathway. Those are underway for all the ports I've mentioned on the screen today. Those are underway. They're at various stages of completion. Some ports are what they would say were almost shovel ready in terms of they've already got plans, if not full engineering plans, at least concept plans completed. They're in their environmentals, now. The various states of. I'm not really able to share details because we're under NDAs with some of these ports, but I can say that they're all at various stages of I guess, development, early stage development, and they'll reach a point where they're waiting for a contract or a lease in order to then get their business case approved to spend capex on upgrading. So there's some pre-feed going on, but there's no real money being spent just yet because they don't have any certainty.
Yeah, great. And just a follow-up question to that, you mentioned around lakes entrance and the role that multiple ports will play. One of the questions has been, doesn't it make sense to have one port for Australia? The industry is not going to be big enough to build multiple ports for offshore wind. So if you could, I guess, elaborate a bit more on that question.
When you're looking for a site for offshore wind, there are a number of factors you look for. Shallow water, wind resource are the two key ones. Proximity to demand, proximity to grid, and the big one that everyone tends to forget is proximity to a port, not only for operations and maintenance, to actually construct the wind farm. And that distance from port to the wind farm is critical. And so it's not feasible that you can have one port to construct all the wind farms in Australia. Western Australia, but the Bunbury area, for example, is going to need a port in Western Australia. You cannot marshal a wind farm project from eastern states to the Western Australia. The charter rates for the wind turbine installation vessels, I don't know what they are right now. I think they're going to be pushing $1 million a day. If you're spending a couple of days steaming between port and site, your project costs are going to be very quickly make the project uneconomic. So the distance is critical. Yeah. It's a good question. I think I could just expand on that briefly. It would make sense if there was one port that would be able to marshal all the projects in the southeast part of Australia, perhaps. Particularly if that port had land adjacent to it, that could be the base for a supply chain hub. That's a very exciting process, because then you start to talk about real local content. Because when you've got a supply chain hub, all of a sudden you can fabricate and assemble things on port or right beside your terminal that gets a significant proportion of Australian content into the projects. If you don't have that supply chain hub, everything's coming from overseas to your marshalling port. So the criticality of getting a marshalling port identified early and getting that certainty around that marshalling port, apart from the obvious reasons we've discussed, is that it's the only way you get a supply chain hub possible. When you know which port you're going to be marshalling your project out of, or several projects out of, because let's face it, a supply chain hub for fabrication or assembly of any components for these projects is going to require lots of projects back to back in order for fabricators to go out and build their plant in order to prepare to produce the volumes that are going to make it stack up for them financially. So marshalling port certainty breeds supply chain hub possibility, and that's a very exciting prospect, but it's also a very scary prospect if we don't land it. If we don't have government leadership and government support for a marshalling port that's certain, we don't get a supply chain hub, and we don't realise the Australian content potential in these projects.
Great, thanks Ashley. We've got time for one more question, but if you do have questions, submit them, and perhaps Ashley and Andrew can answer them through the Hoover app. The final question, because we're finishing at 3:30, is should consideration be given to utilising the two wharves, one derelict, other operational, and the existing infrastructure located just north of VRET at the BlueScope Steel location? Refurbishment may be better than new construction?
Yeah. The consideration, I guess, has been given to that. It's probably not a suitable port Ashley and I were speaking about it earlier, not necessarily for construction, but it may take some load from somewhere else. Another industry that's using good space or good wharf access or good lay-down area may be able to transition their business there, in turn opening it up for the bigger construction port. Ashley's been down there. I haven't been there for many years, but yeah.
Yeah, no, the facility is not suitable for offshore wind marshalling of any components, but it is potentially suitable for some other trade, and that could have a flow-on effect. So there is capacity at Hastings that can be used for something. Probably haven't got time to flesh that one out further, but
we've probably got time for just that quick last question, Ashley, that's come through on, could you reflect on the post-construction period port activity and what this will look like?
The post-construction?
Post-construction period port activity and what this will look like.
Right, so we're talking about operations and maintenance phase of the project. So we want that to happen in Gippsland. We want it to be local jobs for local people. We want it to be careers for young people in Gippsland. And that's a pretty exciting thing. Being a Gippslander myself, having grown up here and having seen, the power industry be the main industry for people in Newborough, where I grew up. I'm pretty excited to be part of a project that can see, careers for young people in the operations and maintenance of these wind farms. What will it look like? I guess practically, Andrew's a vessel operator. He can tell us. But SOVs, so larger vessels of sort of 80, 90 metres length, that will go out on the field for a couple of weeks at a time. And crew transfer vessels, smaller 15 to 20 metre, 25 metre perhaps vessels that will go out in a couple of hours and do shorter term jobs and come back again, depending on the season and the weather and what vessels are used. But generally, we see a mix of SOVs and CTVs being used on these projects. So ports in Gippsland will host both types of vessels. There'll be depots and warehouses required for a lot of spare parts. There'll be a lot of supporting industries, as Andrew said. Just having a vessel home-based in Corner Inlet requires a whole chain of businesses to support that one vessel. So, you'll be surprised how many people will be involved in just supporting those. Well, you won't be surprised if you've been involved in oil and gas, but it is significant supporting businesses and.
Life after construction, it probably looks exactly like it does for oil and gas now. It's still very busy. Obviously, the demand for labour and supply chain will go up through the construction phase. I probably don't know enough about the actual timeline of what we're looking at now, but if we're talking about 9 gigawatts, it's going to take us 10 years to build that. In 2035, does Victoria and Australia need another 9? Is construction going to finish in 5 years because that's how long it takes? I don't know. It's probably more of a political question or a demand question, I guess. But construction could continue for many years if we realise all of the opportunity that's out there.
Thanks, Andrew. And I've just been told that it's afternoon tea time. So we might be able to, if both of you are going to be sticking around for afternoon tea, we can continue the questions and the discussion on ports over afternoon tea. But Ashley, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you for everyone. And please feel free to reach out and come and talk to us. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Tony.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to what is one of the last sessions today before we move into the filming, the entertainment with Planet Wind this afternoon. So it's my great pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you about empowering local talent and training for the renewables industries. And my name's Bill Mundy, if you don't happen to know. I work for Gippsland Skies. I'm part of the group of developers effectively that's looking to develop the offshore wind projects. I'll welcome to the stage my fellow panellists today. So if they'd like to all just come out onto the stage. We have with us today Nicole, and Veronica, and Holly, and Michaela, and Bernadette, and Kate. So we've got quite a contingent here today, and the way we're going to work this session is Nicole is actually going to come out and she'll do, or come up to the lectern in a second and do a presentation. And then once Nicole has done the presentation, we'll then move to a question and answer session, if you like, with all of the panellists. So what I thought I might do is just to introduce all of the panellists. I'll get each of the panellists just to put up their hands so they can be identified as I start to read their bio. So Bernadette O'Connor is the President of the Australian Renewables Academy and the Executive Director of the Management Governments Australia Proprietary Limited and CEO of Workforce Plus Incorporated. She's the Executive Chair of DEC Housing and Director Enabled Social Enterprises. She holds a range of tertiary qualifications to master's level. Bernadette understands the future challenges facing business and industry as they seek to navigate a rapidly changing economic environment and embrace the opportunities emerging with the new energy and clean economy revolution. She has over 25 years of experience as a CEO and brings strong practical approach to engaging with stakeholders. The Australian Renewables Academy is leading national dialogue at the community level on clean energy and workforce development. Thank you, Bernadette, for your contributions today. Michaela over there is the Associate Director of Partnerships and Growth at Federation University. She is the Chair of West Gippsland Catchment Management Authority and a member of the Victoria Marine and Coastal Council. Michaela is a former Bawbaw Shire Councillor, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, and was Chair of One Gippsland, West Gippsland Library, and the Deputy Chair of the Peri-urban Group of Rural Councils. Peri-urban Group of Rural Councils, right. Michaela has worked at EBA Victoria, Gippsland Water, and in media engagement and communications in the private sector. She's also taught at schools in Japan and the UK. Didn't know that, Michaela. No doubt about it, is there? Michaela and her husband, Chris, who happened to talk about their marriage in the session that he was doing. So if you missed that session, you missed more insights into Michaela. Chris run a 40-acre property in the Strzelecki Ranges and enjoy spending time there with their family and the travellers from around the world who visit to learn about their farm. Are they the backpackers? Right, okay.
Woofers.
The woofers, right, okay. Michaela believes that education is fundamental to sustainable community wellbeing and wants to see Gippsland continue as a wonderful place to live and work. Your home is actually off-grid, isn't it? Fully off-grid?
Yes, it is, very fortunately, over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I bet, absolutely. Holly, where's Holly? Hello, Holly. Holly Perham is the Project Leader, Clean Economy and Victorian Skills Authority. So Holly is deeply committed to the Gippsland region, bringing her passion for education, training and partnerships development to her various roles. As a dedicated advocate for regional growth, Holly is focused on creating opportunities for people in Gippsland to flourish. In 2016, Holly completed the Gippsland Community Leadership Program and continues to contribute to the region's development as a member of its advisory committee. They're really good, aren't they? Regional leadership programs are a real necessity, and if there's anybody from the state government other than Holly sitting in the audience, you should fund regional leadership programs. Sorry, I just got off track there for a moment, but that needs to happen. Her leadership extends to her role as Board Director for the Gippsland Centre Against Sexual Assault, where she works to support and uplift vulnerable communities. Holly holds a degree in Sociology from La Trobe University and a Masters of Information Management from RMIT. Her professional journey includes significant contributions in community-based RTOs, where she has both delivered training and led teams. In her government role, Holly played a crucial part in the La Trobe Valley Worker Transition Service, aiding the community through the Hazelwood mine closure. Currently, Holly serves at the Victorian Skills Authority, where she leads initiatives to identify and develop skills for the emerging clean economy through underscoring her commitment to both regional advancement and sustainable growth and future. That's a lot, Holly, isn't it? Jeez.
Yes. ChatGPT is a wonderful thing.
And absolutely. Now, Kate, where's Kate? Hello, Kate. Kate is the manager of a renewable energy transition at Federation University, as well as addressing the transition of existing energy workers in the Latrobe Valley. Kate works with industry to develop energy transition initiatives at the university and is deeply involved with the expansion of the university's APRATEC to Gippsland. And you would have heard that APRATEC Gippsland has been recently announced by the university. It's an initiative which extends, I better not say too much more because I'll quiet, sorry, won't say any more. Kate also works closely with local school students and local learning and employment networks to help encourage school students to find pathways into future training and employment in the Gippsland clean economy. Kate is the chair of the Clean Energy Council's University Industry Working Group. She's also a member of the Adult Community and Further Education Board, which oversees the statewide provision of pre-accredited education through the Victorian Government's Learn Local initiative or network, which provides community-based foundation and life skills for adults making that brave first step to re-engage with education. Right. Veronica, where are you? Veronica Quindlis is the Strategic Advisor for Clean Energy TAFE Gippsland. Veronica Quindlis currently holds the role of a strategic advisor. She's responsible for connecting and engaging the external market across the clean energy sector. Prior to this, she held several roles across CSIRO, including the business development and commercialisation strategy for CSIRO's mission, digital, national facilities, collection sector, energy, environment and resources sector. Is that all one sector?
No, they're about 3 or 4 sectors.
Right, okay, well, it sounded like a lot. And built CSI's analyst team that manages the enterprise revenue pipeline, undertakes market analysis and monitors customer satisfaction. Veronica has over 20 years senior executive experience in customer-facing roles, covering energy, government, financial services, research and development, telecommunications, media, mining, life science and life sciences sectors. Is there anything you haven't done?
That's what happens when you work in the tech sector.
Boy, oh boy. Prior to joining CSIRO, Veronica held executive leadership roles in sales and marketing for a number of multinational technology companies, where she led global sales teams working with vertically integrated markets to identify, design and implement business solutions. Veronica's business and government experience, combined with a master's in politics and policy, brings a high degree of knowledge and expertise of working with both the public and private sectors. Included in this is the understanding of the processes required to introduce innovative technology solutions that transform business and government to deliver outcomes and competitiveness and growth. So finally, I think we've got through just about everybody other than Nicole. So Nicole is a strategic projects lead at the Clean Energy Council, and over the last 6 months while Dr. Anita Talberg has been on paternity leave, Nicole has also led the development and implementation of the CC strategy on clean energy workforce issues. This includes matching education and training to meet industry needs and supporting a diverse and inclusive workplace. Currently, Nicole is working with industry in the training sector to develop a workforce planning tool that will support the growth of the clean energy trade workforce. Before joining the CEC in October 23, Nicole led the design and implementation of the Victorian Government's Clean Economy Workforce Skills Initiative. Nicole has over 15 years of experience in government and working primarily in strategic policy development and the reform across trade, industry and education. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from Melbourne Uni, a Bachelor of Business from Vic Uni, and is currently completing a Masters of Legal Studies and specialising in public sector governance regulation at Monash. Is there anything you're not doing? Trying to raise a family as well? Yeah, crikeys. Anyway, that introduction of all of our speakers is really important, because what we aim to do today is to get Nicole shortly to do a short presentation. And then from here, or from Nicole's presentation, we'll actually do a bit of a Q&A with the panel, building on the stage that Nicole will set for us in terms of the way in which qualifications and the training industry is looking to reform to support the renewable energy sector. So I'll hand to you, Nicole.
And good afternoon, workforce development diehards. And before I start, I also just hope that I'm not the only one who's noticed an all-female panel. And there's 6 of us, so that's kind of awesome. So thanks, Bill, for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. The Clean Energy Council is proud to be a silver sponsor for this 3rd Gippsland New Energy Conference, and equally pleased to be part of this afternoon's Discover Renewable Energy Expo. As Bill said, my name is Nicole Bolt, and I'm the Strategic Projects Lead at the CEC. I'm not a local, I'm Melbourne-based, and I must confess some envy and FOMO when I attend these sorts of regional events, because I get to experience firsthand how well regions pull together to organise things like this for people, their communities and industry. I remember when the first GNEC was held back in 2022, and I was working in the Victorian public sector, leading the development and implementation of the government's Clean Economy Workforce Skills Initiative. And Latrobe Valley Authority colleagues told me about this conference, and I was desperate to attend, but at that stage wasn't able to. And it's impressive to see how in such a short space of time, this conference has become a flagship energy event, not just for Victoria, but for Australia. So well done to the Gippsland Climate Change Network and to the Latrobe Council and Wellington Shire Council for hosting. And so I'm finally participating, and I'm here representing the renewable energy and storage industry as an employee of the CEC, which is the leading national peak body for renewable energy and storage with around 1,000 members. And despite having worked in skills and training for now over 13 years, and more specifically in the clean economy space for about 5 of those, I still have a lot to learn. And one powerful moment of learning for me came when I was still a public servant, and I got to hear from somebody as part of consultations we were doing, the sense of pride Gippsland has in being the primary power generator for our state, and how important it was for this sense of pride to be understood by policymakers and for it to continue in the new energy world. It was a watershed moment for me in terms of understanding the relationship between energy generation and communities. And underpinning this are jobs. Jobs for people so they can support themselves, their families, and their communities. So when Bill and I spoke about this session, he mentioned to me that it would be good to challenge ourselves, for us to think about the next round of activity required to support empowering local talent. And this resonated because colleagues and I in the workforce development team at the CEC have been thinking more deeply about the next wave of activity required to elevate and realise job opportunities in the renewable energy sector. And we keep turning towards place-based approaches and the need to understand in more detail the specific challenges and opportunities different regions have when wanting to take advantage of the energy transition and to support the local workforce. We know, as do so many other people who are working in this space, that we need to grow the workforce at pace and at volume if we are to address climate change and meet governmental targets. In recent years, various modelling has identified the scale at which we need to fill certain jobs and address workforce shortages. For example, Jobs and Skills Australia modelling shows that Australia is likely to need 32,000 more electricians in the next 6 to 7 years. We need close to 2 million workers in building and engineering trades by 2050, and the clean energy supply workforce will likely need to grow from approximately 52,000 workers today to 84,000 by 2050. So this information is helpful from a policy perspective. It's helpful in getting decision makers to sit up, listen and act so that the right policy levers are in place to support what needs to be done. But does it help a 19-year-old apprentice interested in working on a solar or wind farm know what skills are required and how to get them? Does it help a worker from a coal-fired power plant know what to do and where to turn to take advantage of their existing skills and experience and remain employed in the energy sector? Does it help a region know how to mobilise local talent and understand its infrastructure needs, should it be a region where renewable energy projects will take place? And what about the parents of young people who show an interest in working in renewable energy? What do they tell them? What are the specific opportunities and pathways for generations to come? This is our challenge, and we are working with industry to meet this challenge. So we know that most of the clean energy jobs are in regional Australia. And this is what I'm showing up on this slide here. We know that they are mostly in construction, and there are also jobs, ongoing jobs in operation and maintenance over the operating life of renewable infrastructure. So while we know that the energy transition needs loads of engineers, electricians and tradespeople, we also need project managers. We need lawyers and finance managers, sales managers with excellent knowledge of the energy sector, providing information and technical support. Health and safety managers are crucial to site teams. We need environmental scientists, stakeholder liaison and community engagement managers to work with communities. So today I want to tell you about some of the practical solutions and next steps we are taking at the CEC with industry to address this. So the first initiative I want to tell you about is our Careers for Net Zero initiative that was launched last October in partnership with the Energy Efficiency Council. Last month, with funding from the Queensland Government, the CEC and the EEC went to regional Queensland and hosted our first 3 regional Careers for Net Zero roadshows, where industry turned up to promote local workforce opportunities. It was an incredible couple of weeks in Toowoomba, Gladstone and Townsville, where young people, students and workers got to talk to employers about genuine local job opportunities now and into the future. We wanted to bring industry and community together, like this event, to create awareness and attract people into the workforce. Through our Careers for Net Zero initiative, we also want to emphasise that individuals can take their passion, their existing skills and their experience to create a pathway, to create a career in the clean economy. A key part of the Careers for Net Zero mission is to empower everyday Aussies to make a difference, enable students, graduates and experienced workers to find their role in Australia's clean economy. And we're also implementing a number of strategic projects to support the renewable energy trade workforce. So today I want to focus on one specific one that's relevant to Victoria. This is our Victorian Clean Energy Required Training Project. It's funded by the Victorian Government, and TAFE Gippsland and Federation Uni are official project partners of ours. But we also run a Women in Renewables program that offers support to women across the career span, from entry level to late career stages, and we're about to embark on 2 major projects, a pilot grid connection engineer graduate program and our Powering Up Clean Energy on Country project in partnership with First Nations Clean Energy Network. But to talk a little bit about VCERT, this is essentially a skills mapping exercise across the trades within battery, wind and solar. So we can develop a skills matrix, and this is for industry, for training organisations and learners, a digital skills passport for workers and a digital tool for employers. And we're doing this to provide our members with clearer industry benchmarks and expectations to support project planning and delivery, better data around where the workers are and their skill levels, tools to support verification of competency and workforce compliance, and a more granular advocacy at state and national level on skills and competency needs, mindful of the jurisdictional and sector differences. We want to support workers and students to enter and build trade careers in renewable energy, especially in locations where projects are, and have the confidence that renewable energy is a safe and rewarding place to work, and so people can start thinking about themselves as having a career in this sector and map out the jobs and their pathways. And we want to support communities and service networks with more information about career pathways and required training, more information about where and when projects are happening. So on this particular project, which is being implemented now, there are many ways to get involved if you're interested, and we're hosting targeted workshops and currently going through a co-design phase with end users for our digital tool. That's happening now until November, and we're keen to chat with anybody who wants to know more about the project. So what I want to emphasise, okay, so this is the team. This is our workforce development team at the CEC, and I'm putting this up here in case anyone wants to take a screenshot, in particular to contact Emma Hall, project manager for VCERT, because we are currently engaging in the state with consultations, but also just to give you a sense of the different projects that we're doing, and if you wanted to reach out to anybody to know a little bit more. We're going to be at the expo for a little bit later on today and at the Youth Summit tomorrow, so please come and say hi. But in closing, I wanted to leave you with a clip that we have done at the CEC, which documents and shows some of the sorts of jobs and roles in the renewable energy sector and puts faces and real people to these roles. So if technology works, and I've been told that it will, there's Alice. So at the end of this, there'll be a QR code where you can download and actually listen to some of the watch clips of all the people who are in this video talk about what they're doing. But for now, up with the music. And I would encourage people to go onto YouTube and do the opposite that I tell my son, which is get off YouTube, but go onto YouTube and have a look at these clips. I have shown him all of these videos and he gets very bored, but I don't. And we've really, we've done this because we're trying, particularly in the communities, to create that awareness and to show the real people in real jobs and the opportunities. So on that note, Bill, over to you. Thank you.
Well, I might resume my place at the lectern. I don't need that.
Okay.
No, thank you. Thank you. And what we'll do now is we'll just move to a little bit of a Q&A. So, Holly, you've listened to what Nicole has said in relation to the qualifications and the work that the CEC is doing. So with the increasing need around urgency around the transition to net zero and the need for more skilled workers, the question is, what sort of reform is being considered that could be introduced to the VET delivery to alleviate teacher shortages and increase the quantity and the quality of the student experience?
That's a great question, Bill. So at the Victorian Skills Authority, our role is really around predicting future skills, looking at how we collaborate better with industry and improving the quality of the delivery in the Victorian vocational education sector. So as part of our work, we are currently partnering with the Commonwealth around their qualification reform work, and our CEO, Craig Robinson, is chairing that work with the Commonwealth. And as part of that, the research and the investigation with jobs and skills councils across Australia, we are really looking to see at how we can challenge the current qualification system and how it operates. So some of the things that we've done since vocational education and trades have been delivered through the TAFE sector and private RTO sector is that we've really delivered to tasks, and we've created a system that has reduced the mobility of the labour force. So we are looking at the ways in which we can look at broad-based qualifications that can increase the mobility of the labour force to change their career, so across the trades, how they might be able to move across from agriculture to advanced manufacturing to clean energy and similar type roles. So what are the broad skills that are required for that workforce? And also, if we improve the quality, then how they then transfer or uplift their skills and move into higher education. So what we call a T-shaped student or learner. And so the opportunities we have with looking at that work is that potentially trainer workforces can be encouraged to deliver broader based qualifications, and then those qualifications, the need for the worker, the trainer workforce will hopefully be reduced in some areas. So we have a teacher crisis at the moment. We don't have enough teachers in secondary schools. We don't have enough TAFE teachers, which Veronica could be able to tell you about. And we're also struggling at higher ed as well in relation to training. So where we're able to deliver qualifications across sectors, we might be able to relieve some of the pressure that's on our current training system.
Excellent, Holly. And I suppose if you think about it, what we heard from you then is that industry needs to lean in to support the education sector to actually increase the number of folks that can act as those educators for the next generation of workers that were coming through, etc.
Absolutely. And, you know, if I have any advice to any of the proponents of offshore wind or any of the technologies that we're seeing over the last couple of days, is that we have a really strong education and training network in Gippsland, but the specialist skills that some of these industries are providing, your input into our education and training system is absolutely vital. And I think that can be a really great collaboration and, you know, being able to learn from what we know, where the expertise lies in Gippsland and how we do that delivery. I mean, it's so fantastic to see all these Gippsland women that are supporting the education and training sector for clean energy. So I think there's a really ripe opportunity for industry to provide some of the expertise in the technology, but also learn from us around our education and training techniques.
Excellent. Thanks, Holly. So Veronica, we've heard from Holly and the possible opportunities for reform and the way that delivery occurs and the recent announcements that were made regarding TAFE Gippsland establishing an offshore wind skills lab. What do you see as the opportunity for TAFE Gippsland to shape the qualifications and the way they are delivered for the offshore wind industry sector?
Thank you, Bill. Before I answer that question, I'm going to give a plug for a new brochure that we have out. It is our capability statement for the renewable energy sector. And if anybody would like one of these, please come and see me and I'll give this to you. But it actually talks about our credentials, our legacy, and what it is that we bring to the renewable energy sector. So coming back to your question about the offshore wind skills lab, we have been selected to lead that piece of work on behalf of the TAFE network for Victoria, in partnership with some TAFEs like Federation TAFE, Southwest TAFE, as well as Holmesglen that have specialist skills that the offshore wind sector is going to need. And when we look at the offshore wind sector and all of the conversations that are going on, most people would think it's about turbines, and it's not. There is the offshore wind sector in particular, and there's a lot of specialist skills that's required, but there is also the supply chain, and we also need to look at how do we support the supply chain. And from an Australian context, I think that's probably where our opportunity is. How do we train and skill the supply chain to support this emerging new industry? So having said that, looking at the supply chain and also the specific skills needed for the sector, the value chain of the skills and education that's required for the offshore wind is at primary and secondary schools, it's vocational training, it's higher education training, it's industry training, and then there is continuous training. So if we look at that value chain, it requires a joined up approach. And as Holly has pointed out, all of those areas need to play a role here. And in particular, how do we take advantage in the Gippsland region that where we have a competitive advantage. So from a TAFE Gippsland perspective, our legacy, we've been training the workforce here for 95 years. So the skills that's required around civil construction, electricians, plumbers, all of that, we already provide that. But in addition, we also have the marine training skills, and I'm not sure if many people know about that. So going forward with offshore wind, seafaring is going to be an important skills and roles that's required here. And I don't know if anybody attended the ports conversation that was before this section. It was fascinating to hear both the gentlemen talk about the maritime skills and that's required for the offshore wind in particular. So there is great opportunity. And from our perspective, from a TAFE Gippsland perspective, there are things that we are already looking at that we already currently do. How do we then take that to ensure the skills are also transferable? As Holly mentioned, it's not just the sector alone, it's how do we also ensure the adjacent sectors benefit from that? And the adjacent sectors are manufacturing, agriculture, and all of those other sectors. So we are looking at this holistically. We're also looking at it on how it can be a joined up approach that can then develop the capability and the talent that this emerging sector is going to need going forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Veronica. So, Bernadette, the Australian Renewables Academy has been working hard delivering training and consulting with communities across the nation affected by the transition to a new renewable energy powered future. Having heard from Holly, having heard from Nicole, having heard from Veronica, and having almost done a listening tour around the nation in terms of what you hear from communities, what is the conversation at community level you see as the critical things the sector, both VET and HE, can do, so higher education can do, to support the transition at pace?
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone. And I'm going to do it before I answer as well. I'd like to say to everyone, give yourselves a round of applause for being here at 4:30 or so on the last day, and for choosing us over the nuclear option. I mean, well done. To be pointing at those other guys.
Maybe this is the nuclear option.
This is the nuclear option. And I will, as a bit of context, as Bill said, it's been quite a luxury, in fact, to have been travelling around Australia. We've still got 3 dinners and dialogues to do over the next month. But over the last 4 years, the Australian Renewables Academy has been running regional forums and then national forums, and then this year dinners in Tarelgan, Warrnambool, Whyalla, Mount Gambier, Darwin, we've got Townsville, the Hunter and Geelong to go. We've got people saying from the Illawarra, come here, people wanting a dinner in Millicent. So local people, really interesting cross-sections of people, state government, federal government, local government, community people, industry, Office of Corrections, our Indigenous communities, the really interesting local people who are choosing to come together and have very robust conversations around the things that matter most for the developments in their community. And the thing that matters most are the people and where the jobs are going to, how the jobs are going to actually manifest into local jobs for local people with skills and career pathways that don't cannibalise the other businesses and industry sectors in their local community. So the challenges that local people have put forward in terms of the our current system and the at-pace piece is they are around, we talk about and have for a very long time, we say, oh, we're really flexible, we're really responsive as sectors and we're really supportive. But I challenge us to say, well, are we? Like, what do those words really mean in the way that our current economies and societies actually work? And so I shouldn't say I should say we. These were all I'm doing is voicing the conversations that we've been having. And when we're saying that young people as apprentices have to travel distances to take training in parts of Australia instead of having that training on their back door. That's not responsive enough. It's not supportive enough, and it's not flexible enough. When we're saying, well, we can't get people, you know, we're going to have to take that 52,000 and make that, leverage that into 800,000 people, that we can't do that by saying people must come to us in our classrooms. We're going to have to go to people. We're going to have to go to them at the time and the place that suits them. And that's if we're then talking about people who are already in the workforce whose jobs are going to change, and they're going to have to be working and changing at the same time. We also are saying, well, what about those people who are not in the workforce or not fully in the workforce? And these are opportunities that are going to come for us to be very much more innovative and brave about the sorts of education, training and employment-related programs we've got to enable those people to make the most of the developments in our regions. It's a truly regional conversation, although Canberra wanted to be, the Minister from Canberra wanted to be counted as regional because of the transition that they've got, and I thought he had a fair point. They've got to make significant changes to a regional city in the way that it operates as well. So, Bill, that's sort of very rushed.
That's fine, Bernadette. And so what I heard was place-based.
Yeah.
So place-based delivery, but can I also say when it comes to qualification reform, we probably need to think about it. I know this is on Holly's agenda and it's on the BSA's and the Education Department's agenda. We need to think about the way the skills are put together. So that currently we have very restrictive, and it's my hobby horse. We have very, very restrictive guidelines around electrical and mechanical training. Why are they separate? I understand they're separate at the moment, but we need to bring them together. We need not to separate. These are, these are opportunities for us to change the way in which we deliver qualifications and how we certify and license people to effectively deliver qualifications of the future that don't require such restrictions as we have today.
Yeah, totally, Bill.
Yeah.
We've got a complex system for a population of 25 million. And we invented that complex system in the 90s, and it's not fit for purpose for today. Would be my, and I mean, if I wanted to drag out some of my old paper-based things, I think some of us wrote that it wouldn't be fit for purpose, and we wrote that in the 90s. So that idea that we were going to have these very specialised channelled areas has actually left, as the economy has changed and our expectation in workforce has changed, is leaving us short. The notion that we have to spend 8 years or 10 years trying to gain specialities is I can't really say it up on the stages. It is, you know what I mean. The other one, Bill, is that what's come out of the conversations is actually when we're talking to all of us that have employed people, everyone goes, well, who are you looking for? Attitude. Attitude, attitude, attitude. And every time we say as part of our qualification system, we can't teach attitude. And I think we've got to be a lot smarter about thinking about how do we teach attitude? How do we truly teach problem solving, cross-sectorial, task, not so task-based problem solving? And how do we teach flexibility? And I think they're not embedded in our current qualification system. And the other thing, going to Holly's point about lack of skill, lack of trainers, we again coming out across Australia is people are looking for really skilled facilitators with really strong partnerships with industry. And probably my last point, Bill, in terms of having done loads of work with supply chain businesses across Australia, I do the stuff about financial management, all that boring, really boring stuff, chart of accounts. You have no idea how many businesses have right up to COVID, they've probably got a better idea now, very little understanding of their own financial structures. But they'll talk to me about their supply chains of their steel and their paper clips and whatever else. And then I'll say, what's your biggest cost centre? People. Where's your supply chain of people? Where's your investment in your people? So I think it's not just the system of education training. Industry has to think about its supply chain of people.
Absolutely. So we've all got to step up. So, Kate, now turning to you. we've predominantly been discussing the vocational sector and the importance of changes to assist in the transition, but vocational training is only part of the education landscape. And in the early years of the transition to offshore wind generation in Gippsland, what is Federation Uni doing to help build the skilled professionals that will be needed to support the development phase and then construction and operational phases of the offshore wind energy sector, and more generally, the renewable sector overall?
We are we're building up our engineering capacity, obviously here in Churchill and in Berwick, recognising that's very strong. I don't want to, I think Michaela wants to speak a bit about the Asia Pacific Renewable Energy Training Centre, so I won't steal her thunder on that one. But I think I'd just like to say that we're really working in a 19th and 20th century system to try to address 21st century challenges. And so I don't know if our education system is completely fit for purpose. I mean, I'm representing a university. We're an 11th century model of education in universities, that notion that you train, you specialise in one thing, you become a real expert in one thing, which is brilliant and important, but it also is based on an assumption that you will have one specialisation for life. There will be other specialists. You will be effectively in your silo, or back in the day in your monastery, and you don't need to cross over. So I think one of the things all universities need to do is recognise the need to work, as Veronica has said, and this has been said by others, across sectors. So higher education, TAFE, secondary, pre-accredited, to realise it's a full education, training, skills ecosystem, and with industry as well. And to ensure that we embed in our qualifications and in our degrees, and I always draw a distinction between whether someone needs knowledge, skills, or a qualification, because sometimes they just need some knowledge, sometimes they need to skill up, sometimes they actually require a full qualification. But when we are giving people, qualifications, to make sure that they are transferable, that they can move across to different sectors and they can understand the work being done by people next to them and transition as renewable energy changes, because we're trying to train people for technology that doesn't exist today. It won't exist. And most of us in our jobs today are working with technology that did not exist when we began our working careers. It's not a radical concept that you will start your career and end your career with your working life with completely different technology around you and completely different challenges. I just think we need to recognise that, build that into a qualification. So when we're training engineers, train engineers with an understanding of supply chain, of business skills, etc. Train our business graduates with an understanding of engineering, an understanding of law, to actually understand that, so they can transition, they can work better. I know Federation University has developed the dual qualification across as an electrical apprenticeship and electrical engineering to address a problem, which was that as our electrical systems become more and more complex, there are issues which electricians can work on, but an engineer needs to sign off on, and an engineer can't touch but has to sign off on. Well, we've said, well, we can address that by saying, well, you can come out with both. You can do an apprenticeship and have a degree. And that gives people, it makes it a lot easier when you can employ one person, not two, to get something done, and that one person carries the knowledge and arguably mindset of two sets of specialisation. So I think we need to address how our education system, that we work in, we live in and we love, and we're in it because we love it, but we're really probably not in it because we love the system. We're in it because we love educating and challenging, and we're in the solutions business. So we need to recognise that it's an 18th, 19th century, 20th century at best model, going back 30 years to the 90s, to address 21st century and even 22nd century opportunities.
Built on a foundation of 11th century design.
Yes, well, you're not taking the fluffy robes from us. We want to keep the fluffy hats in academia.
Excellent. So, Michaela, I'll just turn to you. And I almost stole your thunder earlier, so I'm very mindful of the fact that I almost let it slip. So, you've introduced the APRATEC initiative to Gippsland. So what does that mean? What does the APRATEC initiative for Gippsland mean, and how will that help the development of the skilled workforce that's required during the development, construction, and obviously operational phases of the offshore wind industry sector here.
Thanks, Bill. I'm just relieved you didn't ask me a question about marriage. So it really comes down to, as we saw in the video Nicole showed, you can't be what you can't see. I mean, everybody knows that saying, but in Gippsland, there's that long tradition of people working in many of the sectors that cross over with the transition to renewable energy. And it really is providing the link for our students and also that link to research and the places we need to get to enable the transition to a renewable economy. I think the other thing to say is that Gippsland as a region, as you've seen, there's been many observations in this room about the power of us as a region, and I have to say I'm a proud Gippslander, born and bred, went away, came back. This APRETEC really is the Gippsland focus for the university in this region. Bill was very, very strongly associated with the success of APRETEC at Mount Helen, which is our Ballarat campus. And I know that was a long slog, Bill, so well done in getting to that point. And the strength of the industry partnerships that you built up as in the process of doing that are also well represented on this side of the state in our partnerships already with industry onshore and developing offshore. In fact, the closest wind power project to us is Osmy's at Delburn, which is an onshore wind project, and they're one of the investors in APRETEC in Gippsland. So I think it's also a demonstration in Gippsland of our partnerships with TAFE Gippsland and with the other people in the room. I think, Bernadette, you and I have been to every one of the energy conferences, and I think I was at your first event you ran in Sale. So there's a long-standing and really deep connections in this region, and the university really is a key part. We're expected to be part of it by our community and our industry partners, and we are meeting that need. In Gippsland, we'll have, as well as the wind industry focus, there's also hydrogen. We have an expert in hydrogen who I learnt today also knows a bit about microbiology as well. So we're also recruiting for an associate professor in wind energy to be part of APRETEC. And it also enables many of our existing schools, such as C4NETA, which is too long an acronym for me to say at this time of the day, but is our renewable energy specialists around grid and connections. And also at our Berwick campus, which will connect into APRETEC, we've got a strong focus on business and IT. And as others have pointed out, Kate, you talked about the dual degree with engineering and electrical. There's an increasing intersection between the Internet of Things, IT, and the previously regarded technical trades. So we want to reflect that as APRETEC develops.
Awesome, Michaela. And what we can see, I think, obviously, is that through the conversation we've had with all of the panelists, is that there's a real sense of the need to respond to the industry's requirements. And that through the skills lab development, through the work that you're doing with APRETEC, et cetera, the region is going to be well positioned to effectively respond to the needs of industry as it starts to develop. And in this initial construction phase, obviously that's about the professional skills, et cetera. And clearly the opportunity exists for the university to build up capability in that particular area. So well done. We do have a question from the audience, from one of our audience participants, and it might be a Kate or a Michaela question, but so what do we know about the projected demand for workers in regional communities working in sectors outside the clean energy sector, and how can we attract them to the regions, e.g. health, human services, education, hospitality, housing and construction? Is that maybe Michaela, Kate?
I'm wondering also how much it's Holly too, because I'm thinking immediately of the beautiful Victorian Skills Authority jobs dashboards.
Yes.
And I must say that health, allied health, hospitality are, as far as I'm aware with the VSA, very well recognised as skills that will be in demand, and the development of the clean economy only increases that. So I'm not sure, Holly, do you want me to hand over to you on what we know about those.
Yeah, sure. So the Victorian Skills Authority releases the Victorian Skills Plan every year, which provides economic modelling and job projections. So we have an employment forecast dashboard that is available publicly, and people can type in their region. We're not by LGA, and I understand I advocate for Gippsland all the time that we need LGA data. Unfortunately, we only have region data. So we are able to predict the workforce that is required for the Gippsland region as a whole. And so healthcare and social assistance is always number one. We still have a high demand for construction workers, and we also have demand for retail workers and hospitality workers as well. So that is, as I said, a publicly available resource that people are able to access and have a look and see what the region needs and what qualifications also are required to get to those particular occupations as well.
Bill, I can probably add a little to that. One is that we have our first cohort of physiotherapy students graduating this year, and they're 40 students. They actually come from quite a far range as well as from Gippsland, and they've been running a telehealth clinic under supervision, but that's enormously popular and really needed in a community where it's often very difficult and challenging to get to an appointment. And the other thing I would say is, but this year, for the first time, we started a Bachelor of Social Work, which, while the energy people in the room may not recognise that necessarily as an important part of regional success and, I guess, social cohesion, but it definitely is, and it was very strongly advocated for by the industry. And as far as the broader health sector and education, we educate an enormous number of nurses and teachers each year too.
So yeah, and I mean, the reality is that the whole community grows as a result of the introduction of a new sector into it, and as a consequence, all of the qualifications need to grow. So whether it's hospitality, whether it's healthcare, whatever it happens to be, we all need to grow.
Bill, can I say that's all part of creating sustainable communities? You need your teachers, you need your early childhood educators, you need your maternal health nurses and your chemists and your retail workers and hospitality workers to sustain the communities after, construction, really. So you need to make it sustainable. You don't want sort of fly in, fly out or that sort of thing. And you want people to be able to find a variety of employment in their region, not have to go away.
Bernadette, were you reaching for the microphone there?
There's probably a couple of things, but one related to this is that a key message from our forum, the Australian Renewables Academy forum last year, when we asked the question of one of our speakers about, the key sort of issue in terms of workforce, she said childcare. It's all about childcare. And if we don't fix childcare, we're missing a sizable slice of the potential workforce, and then that's been completely reinforced by conversations in other parts of, other regional areas.
Absolutely. Well, we all know about childcare deserts that exist across regional Australia. And we also know that not only is there childcare deserts, but there's also a lack of, where there's adequate facilities, there's a lack of space in the facilities to actually deliver a sufficient enough childcare to support the community, to allow young mums or mums particularly to come back into the workforce. So certainly addressing childcare issues at a regional level is really important.
And Bill, I always put out a bit of a plea for people to still donate to me for my speeding fines from the kinder year when I.
Absolutely. So I think we're just about on time. I always like, if anybody's or any members of the audience have been in a meeting with me, I love to bring a meeting to an end just before it's due to close. So I give you back even 30 seconds in your calendar. I think I'm going to do that today and bring you back 30 seconds back into your day as a result of just finishing a little bit earlier than we had anticipated. I'm not sure what I'm standing between. I'm standing between obviously Michaela and her talking about.
I just thought I'd sneak 5 seconds to say we've got quite a few of these on our stand. If you haven't got one already, come and see me, which is Transforming Victoria's New Energy Workforce. So some information on what FED does.
Excellent. So put your hands together for our panellists today and a great session. I'm not quite sure what I'm standing between you, whether it's you, drinks, Planet Wind, I'm not sure, but whatever it happens to be, enjoy the rest of your evening. If you're driving home at this point in time, do it safely. Do all the things that our safety Dave told us earlier today, didn't he, Darren?
He did.
He did.
With his vicious dog.
With his vicious dog that doesn't
He's not
like you.
vicious.
He doesn't like me at all.
Doesn't like you at all.
That's right.
But I'll hand back to Darren.
Well, thank you. Can you just put your hands together for Bill and our panel over here, please?